When did you realize, oh, I've got to run for my life? Bad diesel fire at work. I saw the fireball billowing towards me, so I jumped in a pit. The fireball blew over me, and when it retreated, I got the heck out of Dodge. I got some gnarly third-degree burns, but I survived. What the frick? Do you work in Bowser's Castle? Well, it was an oil refinery, actually. A 500-pound hog got loose at the state fair and started charging right at me. I've never run so fast in my life. I was leaving for work at 5:30 a.m. while it was dark. I locked the inside door handle and walked out the door, pulling the door closed behind me. As I turned around to walk off the porch towards my car, I saw 4 men jump out of a van and start coming towards me. The street was otherwise empty. My heart was pounding and I felt panic start as I was digging in my big, messy purse for my keys to unlock the door and get back in my house. The whole time, I was just thinking they're going to grab me, shove me in the van, commit the unspeakable act on me, and kill me. I was able to get back in my house before they made it to me, but it scared the crap out of me. Turns out they were immigration officers looking for someone who used to live in our house, and that is standard practice for them if they think the suspect will run. After I graduated from college, I finally landed an interview with a guy who was starting his own company. The economy was crappy and I wanted a job. I went for an interview and quickly noticed that he double-locked the door behind me. It was a small office in a strip mall. I immediately started to panic and then realized that no one else was there. He had me sit down, and 2 questions into the interview, he tried to put his hand up my skirt. I was wearing a business skirt suit. I got up and ran, and thankfully was able to open the locks and get the heck out of there. My mum accompanied me to every interview after that for a while. And to clarify some things that people are asking and thinking, first, my mum didn't go with me into every interview after that. She'd go with me, make sure it was safe and that I felt safe, and then would wait outside. Second, I didn't report him because stupid me at the time thought it was my fault. When I ran into my car, I called my mum and she asked me not to tell my dad in fear that my dad would just straight up murder the guy. 3. That awful job interview was for an analyst role in Chicago, and finally, I am okay now. In the days after, I promised myself to never take that crap from anyone ever again, and I've kept that promise. You know, in a lot of the job interview videos we've made fun of the people who bring their parents to interviews. After reading this story, I think it's time to admit that there are situations where a limited degree of parental chauffeuring is actually reasonable. I was solo camping in the woods during a phase where I wanted to be a survival expert. I hiked out miles from any roads or buildings, built a shelter, and then hiked back the way I came. Less than a mile away from camp, I found a dead coyote, decapitated, gutted, and laid out like a sacrifice or something. The eyes were gouged out and it was strung across a big flat rock. A rock which I used as a marker on the way in, so I know it hadn't been there a day before. I ran out of there as fast as I could, knife at the ready, probably 10 miles back to my house. I still have no idea who would have done that, but I know I didn't want to run into them into the woods alone. Sounds like that day you were a survival expert. My friend and I met at Waffle House for lunch. A guy came into the restaurant looking for a piece of paper that he'd accidentally left on the table. The waitress didn't know where the paper was located and might have thrown it away. The guy got upset, saying the paper was important and he was going home to get his gat stored under his mattress. My friend and I quickly paid our check and got the heck out of the restaurant. When I was in high school in the early 80s, I saw a lot of heavy metal bands. I made a friend who could always get us backstage after the show. So Anvil played and we went backstage. All of a sudden, the lead singer said, "Okay, all of the girls, take off your clothes or get out." I got out. The rest of the girls stayed. I do feel the need to say that I met the other bands at the time and they were lovely people. The guys from AITA were very, very nice. The guys from Venom were very quiet and shy. No more name dropping from me, but I feel the need to stick up for my heavy metal boys who are all old now, including me. Let me just Google Anvil really quick. Oh boy, yeah, that's a hard pass for me. I was driving north on the I-65 in the middle of Indiana. The sky was getting dark, the wind was picking up, it started hailing. I turned on the radio to hear that a tornado was nearby. I determined it was behind me going from southwest to northeast and about to cross over the interstate. Other cars were driving slowly or pulling over because of the rain, and I was hauling butt to get away from there. I worked for an agency that helps people do their daily tasks for home healthcare. I had a man whose insurance prohibited personal care like showers, and he was very upset during my visit when I declined his request for bathing. I felt bad at first, but soon the man became very angry with me. He accused me of all kinds of things and started pacing around room to room like he was looking for something. Between that and his spit and yelling rage, I slipped out of the house and drove to a safer place. I reported the incident to my employer and later found out that this person is an unspeakable act offender. Who knows what he was planning that day? Maybe nothing, but I'm glad I left anyway. Always trust your instincts, people. A lot of people that I see are very physically capable but have difficulties in other areas of their lives. This was the only person I ever saw with this particular insurance and the only time that I've ever seen personal care prohibited. The agency background checks us, but not the people that we see. And we see a lot of people, and I imagine it's cost-related to just take them on good faith. My coworker actually ran the background check on this guy and showed me how. I started using the database after this incident to keep myself informed when I got suspicious. It's free and available online. I lived in South Everett, Washington for a couple of years. Was walking home from the bus stop to my apartment, which took me behind the Home Depot. Suddenly, a van starts following me. I hear the side door slide open and look behind me to see a man with the top half of his body hanging out of the slider door looking at me. I took off running towards my apartment, literally running as far as I could. The van started going faster. By chance, a guy was pulling out of the driveway of my apartment complex, sees me running for my life and stops. The van immediately turns around and speeds off. The guy asks if I'm okay. I ask him to just stay there and please watch me walk into my apartment, which was the building next to his. He did, thank God. I started carrying mace and a very large knife the next day. I was in a restaurant and they were using a propane tank to power an outdoor heater. Suddenly, the tank started to catch fire and I got out quickly because I thought it was going to explode. The staff turned the tank off and everyone laughed at me for overreacting, but damn, I got scared. You didn't overreact. If one of those tanks blows, they can shoot 30 feet into the air. I've seen it. Oh, what a wimp. You're afraid of an exploding propane tank. I was in Thailand back in 2010 on the Southern Islands after a full moon party. My friends and I were talking to two girls who invited us to play poker. We went and sat down with two German guys and two burly Thai guys full of tats and began to play. They were joking, friendly, and the buy-in was $10. We lost some pots, won some pots, and overall it was a happy experience. The Thai guys beat us, and on the last hand I managed to claw my chips back to about $8. My friend was looking tired, so I gave him the nod, thanked them for the game, and I said we'd cash out and be on our way. The Thai guys put a machete on the table and told us to F off. My friend, myself, and the two German guys noped out of that situation as fast as we could. On the way back, the girls caught up with us and apologized, but it meant F all because they were clearly in on the take. Lesson learned, if pretty girls ask you to play a game, it's for nefarious reasons. Yeah, a machete is a pretty good point to take your losses and call things off, I feel. Honestly, I wonder what would have happened if you had stayed longer and there was more money involved. When I was 17, I met with a 23-year-old guy for a mall date. Can't remember his name for the life of me. I'd just gotten out of a horrible relationship and was trying to distract myself. We had dinner, and when the waiter bought the check, the guy told me he had forgotten his wallet in his car and that if I went with him, he could grab it. I told him it was fine and paid for the meal myself. We went into a couple of shops, but he kept asking me questions about my ex-boyfriend and also mentioned that he had been in jail but wouldn't tell me what for, and I was nervous. Then things came to a head when he kept saying, "Hey, just come to my car for a second, please. Let's listen to music," and kept getting increasingly anxious every time I declined. I was so scared. I immediately pretended to have a period emergency just so I could get out of there quickly, and luckily I'd parked in a different lot than he did. I still have no idea what his intentions were, but man, that was terrifying. As a young teenager, maybe 13 years old, I was camping in the backcountry during a summer camp in the Midwest US. Second to last night of the trip, we started seeing mammatus clouds and the sky turned green, but no immediate rain or hail. Being the good Midwestern kids we were, we knew the signs and found a semi-solid shelter before the storm hit. When we got out of the backcountry, we found that 3 major tornadoes had touched down and gotten as close as half a kilometer to our original campsite. As a New Yorker, I would have just stared at the pretty sky and probably died. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. Some guy in my class. I'm trying not to sound non-inclusive here, but he was a special case. Kept talking about his effed up life. Some things he had done that made people fear him because he was unpredictable included bringing a knife to class, placing it casually on the desk, one of those big Rambo knives. There was another girl in the class who was one of those mouthy types. She talked about him and he responded by getting her in a chokehold and threatening her. Then finally smashing a pint glass over his head for no apparent reason other than to show that he could. He ended up in hospital with those cuts. Everyone stayed the F away from him, but that only added to his paranoia. Everyone graduated, and I stayed in that city for a bit. Bumped into him by accident in my gym. He told me I was one of the few who he didn't want to shank. I was just minding my own business, but he took it as a sign of friendship and wanted to follow me back to my apartment to hang out. I told him I was going to work after the gym, never went back to that gym ever again. I was walking back to my house from my ex's place very early in the morning when I saw this little girl with a backpack running for her life from two big street dogs. At that moment, I didn't think and ran towards the dogs and missed a kick. The two dogs came after me, biting my legs and arm. They were out of control and these were like the longest 5 minutes of my life. I couldn't stop them from biting me. The little girl kept running until I didn't see her anymore. It was just me and the dogs attacking me. I tried to climb a fence to get inside a house, but I couldn't when a taxi driver stopped and went out of the car with a short stick and he tried to scare them off, giving me a chance to run, and without thinking I got inside his car. The guy just ran a couple of times around the car with the dogs behind him until he got in and drove really fast. He took me to the hospital where I got a lot of stitches on my legs, arms, and hands. That guy is my hero. Every now and then I go to his taxi shop and give them sandwiches or something. We never knew what happened to those dogs. I was driving in the dead of winter in Iowa. I saw this guy fishtailing all over behind me and going faster. Eventually, he comes up on my rear and I try to move over to let him speed through. My gut feeling was right. I just acted too late. He lost his traction as he was passing me and hit me and made me spin out, and I flew into a snowplow. I was waiting for the next bus in a bus station at 2 a.m. in Minneapolis. A security guard outside told me to stay within the camera zone. I sat down and waited, all alone except for a couple of weirdos in another part of the station. Suddenly, a guy comes in and walks up to me. He's dressed in a black hoodie, wearing a skeleton mask, and now standing right in front of me. Didn't say a word, just stood there and looked at me. When he started to walk away, I bolted out of there, ran down the street, and luckily found a 24/7 Walgreens. I was the only white guy working at a Hispanic restaurant, and I don't speak Spanish, that's part of it. One night after work, I got invited to drink at one of their houses. All is good, we're drinking, and I even danced a bit. Then after going outside to the back patio to smoke a cigarette, I came back inside, and the guy whose house I was at had a knife and was yelling at these 3 coworkers of mine, blocking the front door, yelling in Spanish that no one is leaving. I knew that much Spanish at least. A bar patron who knew me grabbed me and pleaded to the guy to just let me and him out since we had no part in it. The homeowner lets us both out. I asked the bar patron what the frick was that when we're outside since I can't speak Spanish, and he says the guy thinks my 3 coworkers are sleeping with his wife and he's probably about to kill them. I got in my car and got the F out of there. I was in Paris with my family on holiday. We were walking down the Champs-Élysées when we noticed the road was suddenly lined either side with riot police. We quickly got off the road behind the line of police and ducked into some showroom while some protesters of some kind then had a mini riot with the police. I don't remember much as my parents probably tried to keep me away from the windows so that I wouldn't be able to see or even end up in any sort of danger. I ripped my pants while bowling. Incidentally, I was also going commando, and the meats and cheeses were fully exposed. I bowled a frame or 2 before noticing as well. It was a second date. You know, I feel like we have to congratulate the author of this story for fitting such a tremendous amount of disaster into such a short story. Every segment made it so much worse, and it truly is an achievement in the field of human failure. Well done, and yes, you did have to run and probably move town after that humiliation. One time, I was driving through Kansas in the middle of the night with my girlfriend on a road trip. Summer of 2017, I think. We had issues with the car breaking down in Nebraska, and we were sputtering along until we reached Colby, Kansas, and waited for night so the roads were less busy. As we were driving along, not Highway 70 but just south to stay off the highways, a semi caught up to us. Our car didn't want to go past 50 or 60 miles per hour, and I didn't want to push it and break down. Needless to say, I was going too slow for this semi-truck. For about an entire hour, this guy was riding my butt, flashing his lights. Never honked his horn, though. I'd slow down and pull off to the side a little bit up to let him pass, but every time I did that, he'd slow down too and give me a ton of space. It was now about 2 or 3 a.m. We were in the middle of nowhere, coming up close to the border of Colorado. He's still contently riding my butt and turning his lights on and off again. We finally come across a gas station and pull over to a pump on the right side. A lot of people have suggested to me that the driver was trying to indicate that maybe a light was out on my car or something. Trust me, this was the first thing I checked at the gas station when I got out of the car. The only thing wrong with my car was its inability to accelerate past 50 miles per hour without sputtering. Also, I was driving at night because the heat was about 100 degrees Fahrenheit, we needed a break from driving through Nebraska, and there's less traffic to worry about at night. We didn't get the car fixed right away because we needed to get a gig in southern Colorado that weekend, which made us enough money to fix the car. Yep, we were living out of the car and some tents, and we spent a ton of time driving through the nights or sleeping in random places in the middle of nowhere. And I can't emphasize how literally I mean the middle of nowhere. It was flat deserts forever in all directions. It's an empty shell gas station that's closed and dark as frick. We were hoping that the truck would just pass us and we pretended to pump gas. This frickin' truck slows all the way and stops right there on the road next to us. He proceeded to back his truck up enough to pull into the gas station behind us, perpendicular to our car. I started losing my crap and looking around. I'm standing outside of my car and my girlfriend is screaming for me to get back in the car. This guy gets out of the semi and walks directly towards us. He's only about 50 yards away when I notice a small brown pickup truck sitting on the backside of the shell, eerily placed, and I notice there's someone in it. I run towards him, and as I get closer I realize there's a police badge painted on the side of this brown pickup, and the man inside is actually an officer. I can only imagine what this guy on late night duty was thinking when I was running up to him. He rolls the window down with a confused look on his face. My girlfriend is screaming at me in panic as this guy gets within 10 yards of the car, while I'm spitting about 50 words out of my mouth in about 2 seconds explaining our situation. The officer doesn't say a word and just drives around our car. The guy notices and does an immediate U-turn back towards his truck as the officer is yelling at him to stop. I hop back into my car, look in the rearview mirror for a second to see the officer getting out to try to talk to this guy. I turn on the car, hit the gas, and drive into Colorado a few minutes later. I'll spend the rest of my life wondering what would have happened if that officer wasn't just sitting there that night. Whoever you are, man, bless your soul. I woke up one Friday in a hotel and the internet was down. I went to the lobby to see what was up and saw scenes of chaos on the TV. A crowd had started to gather to watch, including the hotel staff. One employee told me the government had shut down the internet to test it. The scenes on the TV were of violent protests beginning all over Egypt as people made their first push to occupy Tahrir Square. It was January 25, 2011, and I was in Benghazi, Libya, without my US passport. Needless to say, I spent my energy over the next few days trying to get out of the country. I was able to leave, but many of the people I was working with weren't as lucky. The revolution started in Benghazi less than 2 weeks later. It was surreal watching Anderson Cooper broadcasting live from the hotel I'd just been staying in. My parents liked going to the backyard gatherings of friends, which were thinly veiled excuses just to get hammered. They dragged all of us kids along for some reason, but I never much cared for sitting around watching a bunch of adults get wasted. There was always something stupid that happened, and more often than not, it was violent. Now, you have to understand that these friends that they associated with were scum. Wannabe gangsters, drunks, and substance addicts, petty thieves, domestic criminals, and one ex-con who claimed that he'd helped kill the unspeakable act offenders in prison. Just all around the very picture of dregs of our modern society. The night in question had the full cast of lowlives freshly scraped from the bottom of the barrel and put into one backyard, and in hindsight, there's no way something wouldn't happen. It all started when one guy put his hands on his wife. The ex-con guy didn't take kindly to that and punched him out. This guy's buddies got up to square off, and so did the ex-con's buddies. It quickly devolved into yelling and exchanged blows until one of the guys who lived next door came out with a frickin' chainsaw. So I was inside the house on the property and I heard people yelling, screaming, and a pregnant woman who was crying ran in with some kids. I sat there bewildered until my parents ran in, both seemingly almost sober from the adrenaline, and essentially told my brothers and I, we need to go now. So we stayed at my cousin's house close by because my parents were still really in no condition to drive, and to this day I refuse to go to any of those crappy little gatherings. What are your funniest, not safe for work jokes? Well, folks, in case it's not obvious, there has had to be a fair bit of swapping out some words for more YouTube-safe alternatives. I think the jokes still work out just fine, though. A mother, father, and 6-year-old son go to a zoo where they stop to see the elephant. While the father's in the bathroom, the son notices one elephant has a rather large member. Curious, he gets his mum's attention. "Mommy, what's that hanging from the elephant?" "Oh, that's the trunk, honey." "No, further back." "Oh, you mean its tail?" "No, between its legs. That. What is that?" The mother goes red. "Oh, that's nothing, honey." The father returns and the mother goes off to use the bathroom. Still curious, the son asks his dad, "Daddy, what's that hanging from the elephant?" "His trunk, son." "No, further back." "You mean his tail?" "No, that thing, between his legs." "Oh, that. Well, that's the elephant's wang." "Oh, why did Mummy say it was nothing?" "Son, I have spoiled that woman." This one always gets a laugh on construction sites. Little Tommy was about 5 years old. One day he was being a bit of a handful and annoying his mother. His mother said to him, "Timmy, why don't you go across the street and watch the builders work for a while?" Timmy returned home a few hours later and his mother asked him, "Timmy, what did you learn from watching the builders work?" Timmy replied, "Well, first you put the goddamned door up, then the mother fricker doesn't fit, so you have to take that son of a witch back down. Then you have to shave 2 C-word hairs off each side, and then you have to put that wang-sucking door back up." Timmy's mother was gobstruck and all she could say was, "Just wait until your father gets home." A couple of hours later, Timmy's father gets home. Timmy's mother tells Timmy to tell his father what he'd learned. Timmy repeats what he's learned. "Well, first you put the goddamn door up, then the mother fricker doesn't fit, so you have to take that son of a witch back down. Then you have to shave 2 C-word hairs off each side, and then you have to put that clock-sucking door back up." Timmy's father looked at Timmy with a look of anger and disappointment and said, "Timmy, go outside right now and fetch me a switch." Timmy replied, "Frick you, that's the electrician's job." 3 men got stranded on a desert island. After walking around for a while, they're found by some tribesmen. The natives take them back to their hut. The chief tells them, "Go out into the jungle and collect 10 pieces of fruit." The first guy returns with 10 apples and the chief says, "Now, shove them all up your butt without showing any emotion or we'll kill you." He shoves the first up and is in terrible pain, but shows no emotion, but during the process of pushing up the second, he flinches and therefore gets killed. The second guy comes back with 10 cherries and gets told to do the same. He's finding it relatively easy, but when he gets to the 8th, he starts laughing hysterically and gets shot. He meets the first guy in the afterlife, and the guy asks, "Why did you do that? Why did you laugh?" And the second guy replies, "Well, I'd nearly finished when I saw the next guy walking up with 10 pineapples." An Aussie is on holiday driving through New Zealand when he spots a bloke in a paddock doing the deed with a sheep. The Aussie pulls his car over and yells out to the Kiwi fella, "Mate, in Australia we shear those." The Kiwi turns and yells back, "I'm not shearing this one, bro. You can get your own frickin' one." Honestly, you would be surprised at how many jokes in this thread just seem to be the Kiwis and Aussies slandering each other. I might try to spread out those jokes a little bit. A man buys a pack of prophylactics at the pharmacy. The pharmacist says, "Large pack, huh?" The guy buying says, "Yeah, I'm meeting my girlfriend's parents tonight. After dinner, when we go home, we'll be getting it on." Later at the dinner, the guy is praying before he eats his food. His girlfriend says, "I didn't know you were religious." The guy replies, "I didn't know your dad was a pharmacist." A ventriloquist is going for a walk through the countryside. It's a hot day and the sun is beating down on him and he's getting tired and needs a break when he spots a farmhouse. The old farmer that lives there is sitting on his porch in a rocking chair, so the ventriloquist walks up and asks if he can have a glass of water and a shady spot to sit for a bit. The farmer misses having company, so him and the ventriloquist begin chatting while the ventriloquist rests. Now, this ventriloquist has a mischievous side and comes up with an idea. He asks the farmer, "I see you have this big farm here. Can I see some of the animals?" And the farmer gladly brings him around to the barn. First, they see a pig and the ventriloquist walks up to it and says, "Hello there, Mr. Pig. How's life on the farm?" Then, using his skills as a ventriloquist, he makes it seem as though the pig replies to him by saying, "I love it here. I've got plenty of food and plenty of mud to roll around in." The farmer nearly falls over in shock, exclaiming, "Oh my stars, it can talk!" The ventriloquist nods seriously and asks what other animals he has. So the farmer brings him over to an old horse. The ventriloquist asks, "Hello, Mrs. Horse. How are you on this fine day?" To which the horse appears to reply, "Another beautiful day out here in the countryside. Plenty of room to graze in, clean water to drink, and clean hay to sleep on." Again, the farmer can't believe what he's seeing. "All this time and I never knew they could talk," he says. Then the ventriloquist spots some sheep in a pen nearby and says, "Hey, do you mind if I say hello to the sheep?" The farmer's face goes bright red and shouts, "Don't you talk to those sheep! They're liars! Everyone knows those sheep are damn liars!" A guy and a girl meet up in a hospital elevator. The girl says, "I'm here to give blood. They give me $10 every time I give blood. What are you here for?" The man says, "I'm here to donate semen. They give me $50 every time I donate." They go their separate ways until a week later when the man sees the girl rushing for the elevator. He holds the door open for her until she gets in. "Here to donate blood again?" he asks. She shakes her head. Father comes home and little Johnny comes running in tears. Dad, Sparky died. I came home and he was lying on his back with his feet in the air." Dad tries to find the right words, eventually explains, "Sparky is reaching up so Jesus can reach down and take him to heaven." Johnny mulls this over. It makes sense and he feels better. Weeks later, Johnny comes running out in a state of panic. Dad, Mommy almost died today." "Oh my God, what happened?" "I came home early from school and heard moaning. Mommy was on her back with her feet in the air screaming, 'Jesus, I'm coming!' And if it wasn't for Uncle Bobby holding her down, we would have lost her for sure." An old man is sitting on his porch and he sees a kid walking by carrying a roll of duct tape. Old guy yells out, "Hey kid, where are you going with that duct tape?" "Gonna catch me some ducks," says the kid. "What? You can't catch ducks with duct tape," he yells back, but the kid continues on his way. A couple of hours later, the kid is walking back the other way, carrying 4 ducks wrapped in duct tape. The old man can't believe it. The next day, the old guy is sitting on his porch again, and he sees the kid walking by. This time he's got a roll of chicken wire under his arm. The old guy yells out, "Hey kid, where are you going with that chicken wire?" "Gonna catch me some chickens," says the kid. "Seriously? You can't catch chickens with chicken wire," he yells back, but once again, the kid just continues on his way. Later that day, the kid walks back the other way and sure enough, he's got half a dozen chickens wrapped up in the chicken wire. The old guy is astounded. Next day, once again, the old guy is sitting out on his porch and he sees the kid walking in front of his house. He yells out, "Hey kid, what you got under your arm there?" "Pussy willow," says the kid. "Hang on, I'll go get my hat." An Australian is in New Zealand working on a sheep farm with a bunch of Kiwis. After a couple of weeks, he goes to one of them and says, "Hey mate, where are all the girls at? I haven't been laid in ages." The Kiwi says, "Nearest girl is 3 hours away. What we do here when we get in the mood is head down to the paddock, pick us out a sheep, and give it a good rooting." The Aussie is naturally disgusted, but as the weeks go by, he grows more and more desperate. Finally, he sneaks down to a secluded paddock, creeps up on a sheep, drops trow, and starts going to town. Almost immediately, he hears all the other farmhands laughing at him. Trying to quickly pull his pants back up, he yells, "I thought all you guys did it." "We do," replied one of the Kiwis, "but you picked the ugly one." Well, I told you there'd be a few of these, didn't I? These two countries really have an axe to grind with each other, it seems. My girlfriend tried to make me do the deed with her on the hood of her Honda Civic. I refused. If I'm going to do it on a Honda, it's going to be on my own accord. What's the difference between a pickpocket and a peeping Tom? A pickpocket snatches watches. Kinda like the difference between a magic show and a burlesque show. What's the difference? Well, a magic show is a cunning array of stunts. How about the difference between an epileptic cornhusker and a working girl with diarrhea? Alright, what's the difference? An epileptic cornhusker shucks between fits. Man walks by a shop. There's a sign out front that says, cheese sandwiches $1, pull jobs $5. So he walks in and sees a beautiful blonde standing behind the counter. "Are you the woman who gives pull jobs?" She says, "Why yes I am," in a very flirty tone. He says, "Well, wash them hands and make me a cheese sandwich." This is my go-to joke, gets a laugh every time. There's a bar right outside the town I live in that's a hot spot for people driving through town. One night, this guy walks in and sees a jar full of $10, $20, $50, and even a couple of $100 bills in there. So he asks the bartender, "How does somebody win that tip jar?" The bartender says, "That's for anyone who can make the horse in the back laugh." So he strolls to the back where the horse is, closes the door, and a couple of minutes later, he walks out and the horse is laughing uncontrollably. He casually takes the tip jar on his way out. A couple of months later, he enters the same bar and sees an even bigger jar full of cash. So he asks the bartender how to win this one. "That's for anyone who can make the horse stop laughing." The man gets up, walks to the back, and sure enough, a couple of minutes later he walks out and the horse is dead silent. The man grabs the tip jar and is walking away, and the bartender says, "Hey, wait! I gotta know, how did you do it?" The man says, "Well, the first time I told him my wang was bigger than his, and the second time I showed him." 3 men are at the gates of heaven. St. Peter says, "Heaven is a big place. You'll need a vehicle to get around. You'll get one based on how faithful you were to your partner." The first man says, "In our decades of marriage, never once was I even attracted to another woman. I was only faithful to my wife." St. Peter gives him a Rolls Royce. The second man says, "Well, sometimes I had a few one-night stands, but I still loved my wife, and I never lapsed any time else." St. Peter gives him a moderately expensive car. The third man says, "I'm sorry to say this, but I was incredibly unfaithful. I had affairs every week." He gets a bicycle. The 3 men meet a few minutes later. The first guy is crying. The second man asks, "Why are you crying? You have a Rolls Royce." And the first guy says, "Well, I just saw my wife riding by on a skateboard." A man goes to a brothel. The madam welcomes him and says that there's currently a lot of free women and he can do the deed with all of them. The man is very happy with the suggestion and takes the deal. The next day, after such a steamy night, he decides to go back. The madam welcomes him and says that right now only one girl is available. Well, the man was a little upset, but it's better than nothing. After another happy night, he decided to come back again. The madam welcomes him yet again and says, "Oh, sorry, we have no one available right now." The man is clearly upset and keeps asking, maybe he could wait. The madam says, "Well, there is one unpopular choice. You can do it with a badger." Since the man is really feeling the need, he decides why the hell not and took the deal and did the deed with the badger. As a loyal client, he decided to come back tomorrow. The madam welcomes the man but says, "Oh, sorry, there are no girls available. The customer got upset. But hey, what about the badger?" The madam says, "Sorry, even he is taken, but the brothel is introducing a new activity. Watch from the two-way mirror how other clients do the deed with the ladies." The man agrees to try it out. In the room, there are many spectators, and the couple being watched are going really rough and hard. The man pokes another client and says, "Hey, look, what a show." The fellow man smiles and replies, "That's nothing. You should have seen the guy the other night doing it with a badger." Somehow I get the feeling that even if I'm not specifically using the naughty words, that this video might get demonetized anyway? Let's test it out, I guess. A young Greek couple are about to get married, and before the nuptials, the young woman's mother pulls her aside for a quick chat. And Greek men are known to prefer making love in a very specific way. So at some point, he may ask you to turn around. Now, I want you to know that it's okay to say no if you don't want to do it that way. The wedding day comes and goes, and there's no turnaround request from her husband. No request on the honeymoon, nor through their first year. No special request for their first anniversary or their second. Halfway through their 3rd year, her husband says, "You know, if you want, you can turn around and we can try this a different way." The woman says, No. My mother warned me that this day might come and she told me I'd never have to do that if I don't want to." The husband replies, "Well, that's fine with me, but I thought you wanted kids one day." A man is leaving town for a business trip. Knowing he'll be gone for a few weeks, he decides to treat his wife to a new adult toy to keep her satisfied until he returns. However, looking around the local shop, he doesn't see anything that he thinks she'll like. At that point, the shop owner approaches and says, "If you're having trouble deciding, may I show you one of our special items?" "Sure," says the man thankfully. The owner takes out a box from behind the desk labeled Voodoo Wang and explains that it'll fit any hole and do anything you need it to using voodoo magic. The man is skeptical, so he asks for a demonstration. Happy to oblige, the owner says, "Voodoo Wang, my hand." At once, the previously inanimate object springs to life and starts moving back and forth in the owner's hand as if he were giving it a pull job. Voodoo Wang, the door, he continues and points to the entrance. The magic toy flies to the door, shrinks to the size of the door's keyhole, and starts going to town. Now, cautions the owner, this is the important part. Once it starts, it won't stop until it hears, Voodoo Wang, your box. On cue, the Voodoo Wang leaves the door, changes back to its normal size, and returns, dormant, to the box. The man is thrilled with his find and buys it for his wife. When it comes time for him to leave, he gives her the new toy and demonstrates how it works like the shop owner did. The wife, very excited about the new toy, thanks her husband and wishes him well on the trip. About a week passes and the wife decides to try out the Voodoo Wang. Removing it from the box, she says, Voodoo Wang, my hoo-ha! Well, the Wang doesn't hesitate. Jumping out of the box, it changes size to perfectly fit the woman's body and goes to town. It's fantastic. It does everything she wants it to and knows exactly when to speed up, slow down, get rough, be gentle, you name it. After her second climax, the woman says, Voodoo Wang, stop! But nothing happens. Again, she says, Voodoo Wang, stop! But still nothing happens. Realizing she forgot the magic phrase, she starts to panic. Grabbing some clothes and her car keys, she makes a mad dash to the hospital to see if they can help her. She's about halfway there when she has a third, massive, full-bodied climax and starts losing control of the car. At this point, a cop sees her driving erratically and pulls her over. Ma'am, you're driving very recklessly. Care to explain yourself? Well, she does her best to explain the Voodoo Wang to the police officer, but he's clearly not buying it. It's the truth, she pleads shakily. Yeah, right, scoffs the cop. Voodoo Wang my butt. Bill worked in a pickle factory. He had been employed there for a number of years when he came home one day to confess to his wife that he had a terrible compulsion. He had an urge to stick his pickle into the pickle slicer. His wife suggested that he should see some kind of therapist to talk about it, but Bill indicated he'd be too embarrassed. He vowed to overcome the compulsion on his own. One day, a few weeks later, Bill came home absolutely ashen. His wife could see at once that something was seriously wrong. What's wrong, Bill? She asked. Do you remember that I told you I had this tremendous urge to put my wang into the pickle slicer? Oh, Bill, you didn't. Yes, I did. My God, Bill, what happened? I got fired. No, Bill, I mean, what happened with the pickle slicer? Oh, she got fired too. A man is standing stark bare naked on a street corner. A cop walks up and tells him, Sir, you can't be doing that here unless you have a good excuse. I'm going to take you to jail. Yes, sir, I have a good excuse. I was at my girlfriend's apartment, we started drinking. Next thing you know, she jumps up and says, Let's take our clothes off and go to town. I guess I beat her here. Two guys ring the bell of a brothel. The madam opens the door. What do you want? What can we get for $5? For $5, you can crank each other off in those bushes over there. She shuts the door. A few minutes later, the bell rings again. The madam opens the door and it's the same two guys. So, who do we pay? And now, ladies and gentlemen, some nun jokes for your enjoyment. Sister Claire and Sister Teresa are driving down a desert highway when the devil appears on their hood, making threatening gestures. Quick, Sister Teresa says, show him your cross. Sister Claire leans out the window, shouting, Piss off, you wanghead! I'll kick you in the frickin' gonads if you try that crap again! Don't mess with me, you prick! Two young nuns are asked by their Mother Superior to paint a room in their convent, and are sternly warned not to get paint on their habits. To ensure they comply with Mother Superior's order, they decide to remove their clothing and paint in the buck, as the only eyes that will see them will be each other's and those of God. After painting for over an hour, there's a knock at the door. Panicking, the first nun asks, Who's at the door? A reply comes in, It's the blind man. May I come in? The nuns look at each other. Neither wishes to turn away the blind man. The second nun says, If the man is blind, he won't see our exposed bodies. We should let him in. The first nun agrees and opens the door to the man. Nice hooters. Now, where do you want these blinds? A young man walks up and sits down at the bar. What can I get you? The bartender inquires. I want 6 shots of Jägermeister, responded the young man. 6 shots? Are you celebrating something? Yeah, my first go at oral. Well, in that case, let me give you a 7th on the house. No offense, sir, but if 6 shots won't get rid of the taste, nothing will. A cop is eating lunch at a diner when he overhears an elderly couple, maybe in their 80s, talking. The man says, Do you remember this place? The woman answers, Of course. Behind this diner is where we first did the deed. The man says, What do you say we do it again? The woman giggles and says, "Why not?" And they both get up to leave. The cop was taken aback by this and was curious, so he decided to follow them. He follows them as they slowly walk behind the diner. When they go behind the diner, he decides he will just stay there to make sure no one bothers them. He then watches as the lady slowly lifts her dress and the man grabs his pants. The man grabs the fence in front of him and starts going at it full force, like a stallion with his first mare. The cops were taken aback. This guy seemed to have more stamina than anyone in the world. When they were done, the couple starts walking out of the alley and the cop decides to talk to the man. He had to know how he was able to do that. The cop said, "How are you able to keep going like that, even at your age?" The man smiled and answered, "Well, for starters, 60 years ago, that fence wasn't electric." A man moves into a new town and wants to make friends. He goes to the local bar and orders a drink. The bartender says, "Hey, you're new. You want to try out our bar challenge for new guys?" The man says, "Let me hear it." The bartender then goes and says, "Well, first you need to drink this whole bottle of Patron without stopping. Then you have to juggle these 10 beer bottles. After that, there's a gator outside with a loose tooth. Then there's my poor old sister upstairs that's never had a climax in her life." The man says, "F that, I'm not doing that." But after a few beers, he says, "Give me that Patron," with fire in his eyes. He chugs the Patron, no problem. He juggles the beer bottles with no problem. Then he goes outside to the gator. The occupants then hear the gator roar and scratch the man. They hear groans and moans from the man. Then they hear silence. The man comes back to the bar, still adjusting his pants, and says, "Okay, now where's that woman with the loose tooth?" What inappropriate things do female coworkers do to male colleagues? I have one nip that's always erect. It's a side effect from when it was pierced. Had a female coworker who loved to walk by and flick it or outright pinch it. Didn't matter if I was talking to people or just passing her in the hallway. She thought it was playful and would do it all the time. I found it emasculating and embarrassing and asked her to stop repeatedly. It was annoying as F. I wanted to handle it quietly, but she wouldn't stop. Apparently, I was just too sensitive. Actually, it's my nip that's sensitive. It's okay because you're gay. Gay guys like it. Solution. She did it to me as we were entering a room for a staff meeting. I said in a slightly above normal voice in front of our entire team, "I need you to stop touching my nips. Never touch me again." You could hear a pin drop. Got an email from my boss later that day. "Your issue has been addressed. It will not happen again." How did a comment about my nips become the most viewed thing I've ever done on the internet? This one I see in the military a lot. Don't demand equality and treatment like men just to turn around and pull the "but I'm a female, I shouldn't have to do this" excuse. At a company meeting in front of a lot of our coworkers, a woman snuck up behind me and began to give me a neck rub without asking me for permission. I was not pleased, but I didn't say anything because I didn't want to make a scene. When female colleagues massage my neck/shoulder region with one hand while I'm at my desk. Reverse the roles and I would have been seen as the creep. Oh dear. Yeah, massage creeps crop up in all sorts of situations, and I might have briefly flirted with being one for a while, but mostly in my circle of friends, and I will discourage all of that non-consensual touchy-feely crap in others to my dying day. I had a coworker who couldn't wait to tell you about her medical issues. No matter how personal, no matter how much I asked her not to, I got a blow-by-blow of her pap, rectal exam, colonoscopy, and bathroom problems. I wasn't interested in her gynecological issues nor her gastrointestinal issues. Leave me out of it. I have a coworker who's in her 40s and is married with children. Every time I walked past her or I'm near her, she always calls me some pet name like baby or hot stuff. Sometimes it's a little more mundane, like handsome, but either way, she says it out loud where not only staff but students could also hear, and that's super awkward for me. When I used to be a cashier supervisor in retail, about 18 to 19 years old at the time, there was one girl cashier who asked me to come help her. She poked my stomach in front of a customer at the register where she was ringing up his products. I kinda just brushed it off and was very direct with this old man in his 50s who just watched this girl poke me. "Have a nice day, sir." He looked at me with a smile on his face, trying to hold back laughter. I was pretty embarrassed, but I didn't show it. On another occasion, she turned around and pointed her butt at me while looking at me and pointing at it. I think it probably has to be the weirdest way a girl has ever shown interest in me. Bonus story, while working at this retail job, I would greet guests coming through the front entrance. One time, 2 older ladies walked in and I said, "Hey guys, how are you today?" They kind of looked at me funny. About 30 minutes later, my store manager walks over and pulls me aside asking if I called two old ladies guys. I thought he was joking and smiled/chuckled. He was completely serious. They filed a complaint against me. Word to the wise, avoid calling older women guys. Don't touch my beard unless I invite you to do it. I don't care how big or fluffy it looks, leave it be. Bringing your hand that close to someone's face is kind of an intimate gesture. Just don't do it. I've had some women laugh at me because I don't drink, or drink as heavy as the other dudes, and I get told to grow a pair. I'm sorry, does being a male require me to drink my butt off all the time? A, I'm not drinking because I don't want so many calories because I sit my butt down at my desk all day. B, I'm Asian, and I can't physically take nearly as much alcohol as most burly guys. And C, I'm picky with my alcohol. If it tastes like pee to me, I don't like it. Stop asking me when me and my girlfriend are getting married. I'm already living that. Steve, you're 30. Why don't you have kids? Coworker, I've told you. Mrs. Steve has endometriosis and is being treated for it, and it's not an option currently. Leave me the frick alone about it. But Steve, don't you want to have kids? Your kids would be so cute. Rinse, repeat. I have a female coworker that likes to sit on the arm of my chair while we're supposed to do something work-related together. I mean, just pull up a chair and sit next to me. It's not like there aren't any chairs around. Yeah, just because I'm the only guy, that doesn't mean I automatically have to do all the lifting or damn furniture moving. I wasn't hired as a mule, and they would lose their minds if I told them, I don't clean, that's a woman's job. Don't call me hun or darling or any of those. I have a name. I'm not calling anyone babe or dame. And don't fricking touch me. I don't want a hug. I don't want to be playfully slapped. I don't want to be grabbed. We're not friends. I'll shake your hand. I'm not your pet project to feed your ego that you feel you know what looks good and what doesn't. Don't like my hair or clothes? Too fricking bad. If it's in the dress code, you shouldn't care. If I want to change my look, then I will change it. Not because you think this would look good on me, or that it would make me look more presentable. If I commented on your too short skirt or tight butt, skin-colored leggings, I'm sure I'd be pulled in front of HR. A few years ago, the HR manager, a woman around the same age as me, found out that it was my birthday. She got excited, grabbed my hand and led me, holding my hand the whole way, to the general manager's office to tell him that it was my birthday. I was super uncomfortable the whole time, both for her making a big deal over my 37th birthday as if I were turning 7 instead, and because she was holding my hand. I didn't know what to do, and she finally realized that she shouldn't be holding an employee's hand in front of the general manager, and she thankfully let go. I know it made the writer of the story very uncomfortable, but the image of a grown man, and not even a young one at that, being led off like a school kid is quite funny. Please, don't lift my shirt up to look at my chest and back. Yes, I know I'm hairy. If I did that to you, I'd be fricking fired. I think we can agree that lifting someone's shirt clearly crosses the line. I'm retired now, but women felt free to use the men's room whenever the women's room was occupied. I'd walk in and be told to get out. Men using the women's room would have caused a stir. Also, they completely ignore the dress code. Women could get away with wearing shorts and flip-flops to the office, but men had to wear slacks and acceptable non-sneaker shoes. I don't care if a woman uses the men's room, but if they told me to get out while doing so, I would absolutely refuse. If you're the one bending the rules, you have to be on your best behavior. Making statements about men in uniform being a fantasy for them. If I walked up to you in a coffee shop and told you I have a fantasy of doing MILFs or blondes or baristas or 21-year-olds, etc., while rubbing your arm, I would be in deep crap. Don't try to expose body parts to avoid a ticket. If I accidentally let my wang show on a traffic stop, I'd catch another charge. Don't invite me into your home if the reason you called me does not require it. It is very uncomfortable telling you 4 times that I do not need a cup of coffee. Yes, I know your kids are at school and your husband is at work, you've told me a half dozen times. But I'm here because someone drove over your mailbox and I'd really like to just finish this call and get back into my car because it's really cold and my lunch started 3 minutes before this call came out. Honestly, it's incredibly uncomfortable turning down advances while at work. I could be in a very isolated setting with a woman, or worse, a teenager, on a mundane call. Women can get nasty even when you turn them down as politely and respectfully as possible. I don't want you telling people I touched you or made an advance or insert unprofessional action here. Everyone hates cops now. Everyone loves a scandal and would believe you before any investigation. I have called supervisors and partners to a scene because I wanted someone there with me just because of a woman's statements or actions. Civil service is a lot like your food server. We're being polite because it's part of the job. Don't take my politeness as flirting. I've had a coworker who would jokingly slap my face. I asked her to stop many times. She would still slap me in the face. Either kinda hard on the face or as hard as she could on the arm. Told my boss if she slapped me again, I'd slap her right back, and got in trouble for even saying it. I wanted to add something. I agree completely with everyone saying I shouldn't have said I'd slap her back. However, at the time, I still think it outlined the hypocrisy of the situation. After following a conversation, my manager told me that if it happened again, to come back to him with CCTV footage, which covers 99% of where we work. He's an alright boss. I think he panicked at my remarks initially. Had a female coworker that would pinch people. She thought it was cute flirting. No, it's not cute to leave significant bruises all over my arms and chest. She even drew blood a few times because she dug in her nails so hard. Finally got her to stop by avoiding her at all costs and keeping at least an arm's length away from her. Oh yeah, that's definitely inappropriate behavior in the workplace and battery. Report that and escalate to police report if it's not being handled in-house. Just because you're a guy doesn't mean that it's not wrong. You and your boss should be taking this seriously. Don't put up with her behavior. You deserve a safe work environment. Number 1. My muscles are not free to touch just because they look big today. Number 2. Neither is my hair or beard. Number 3. No, I will not comment on your appearance because I don't care how you look and I won't validate or invalidate whatever nonsense you're feeling today. 4. Every request that begins with "a real man would," well, I guess I'm not a real man. Number 5. Not feeling like any undesirable or inconvenient chore is mine by default because I'm a man. Understand real man statements for what they are. Attempted manipulation. It's an immediate red flag that forces me to closely evaluate the statement and typically ends with me ignoring it on principle. This whole series of stories is just giving me flashbacks to being a barista in a coffee shop with loads of regulars. There were some female customers there who treated a few of the workers like a lot of these women treat their colleagues. Where I live, a lot of older women, older than 20s me, like 40, but not like 80, and more typically mothers, tend to refer to younger men by somewhat odd pet names. For example, honey, love, darling, dear, pet, and good lad. I imagine it's because they're just so used to referring to their children, who may well be close to my age, as such. Often when I'm very much their peer or even on occasion their superior. At worst, it's a touch condescending and consequently rude, and not that inappropriate, and it's commonly understood to be nice and well-meaning. However, outside the context of my own culture, for example when dealing with US peers whose workplaces are more corporate, it comes across as super weird and inappropriate and makes our US colleagues feel uncomfortable and harassed, which makes me uncomfortable. It puts me in the awkward position of having to call them on it. A relatively small complaint to have though, which is nice. Come to Yorkshire, the only time people don't call each other love is between two men. I went to visit an agency on Stoke-on-Trent. Our account manager had told me at a previous work trip abroad that affectionate duck was used over love in that area of the UK. They had a cook on site and she came into the meeting room to see what we wanted for lunch. As they introduced me, she went, "Alright, duck," and I nearly lost it with laughter. Please, just stop commenting about how cute I am and stop pulling my goddamn cheeks every time you're talking to me. I'm a 25-year-old grown man, for frick's sake. I should say that I do let the ladies do it because they're like my grandmas, and most heartbreaking of all is that they don't have a family to call their own. So they consider the three young people, me and my best friends AJ and Akash, as their sons and grandsons. Women would just sit on my desk and try to be flirty and this or that, trying to be suggestive or alluring, and it was just awkward as frick. Also, feeling me. Yeah, I lift, but grabbing my chest or shoulders or biceps and whatnot, imagine the outrage if I was a girl. It's the hypocrisy that tees me off more than anything. I've had it happen in several workplaces. Just because you're a guy, so you're obviously into female attention, and fit, these women believe they can feel you up all over your torso and sometimes go for the butt. Like, why don't we get off the clock and ask each other's permission to start groping each other? Maybe I'm not interested in you. If I walked up to any woman at work and said, "Wow, your hooters are huge today," grab bosom. "Those squats are working, cutie," grab butt. "Hey, can you get me that list for X," hand on thigh. Those things would lose me my job immediately, but women can comment on physique and feel me up constantly with no repercussions. The few times I've gone to a boss about it, I'm the butthole. Stop coming up to me with office gossip. You're wasting my time. I don't care if Jessica is sleeping with so-and-so or if Carol is a real witch. Stop coming up to me to show me your 3-year-old put his shirt on backwards with a 10-minute backstory. I've never met your family. I don't want to meet your family. You're my co-worker and not my friend. I don't care. When I have a mustache, don't call it a prawn stash. Don't make jokes about me being inappropriate with children. It's facial hair, not a sexual organ. Please, do not touch me. Just don't touch me. I wouldn't touch you. Don't touch me. And now for the actual inappropriate acts, which only seems to come from women who are 40 or older. Don't call my haircut or outfit or anything hot. If I did that, I'd be in trouble. Don't talk to me about your romantic life. I don't want to hear about your man going down on you just as much as you don't want to hear about me railing my latest Tinder match. Don't ask my help with moving some files from a computer to a USB drive if those files are exposed photos of yourself that you've recently taken. Don't rub your chest, moan and lift your shirt, exposing your 55-year-old bosom in a bra while exclaiming, "None of y'all could handle this." Well, at least that last one was fired. Don't slap my butt. Don't grab my waist. Don't touch my chest. I've been harassed in most jobs I've had. I happen to have mostly worked in female-dominated industries. It's more of a mild annoyance or inconvenience for me because I've never felt threatened or in danger, but that doesn't make it right. Yeah, while it's true that these kinds of things happening to men can be very upsetting and even traumatizing, for the most part we don't feel physically threatened by the harassers. It's good to see this as a call for solidarity against people who use inappropriate behavior across both genders. Had a woman at work fired for walking over to one of her subordinates' desks when he had a question and sat on his lap. I'm guessing he made a loud enough stink because security escorted her out that Friday. Yeah, I should think about that. My female coworkers have a weird obsession with my butt. Can't even count how many times it's been slapped by them. Some of them are okay looking while others are downright ugly. I work for a middle-aged Italian man, and the one time I brought it up, he asked me if I was gay. I declined and he told me to suck it up. It doesn't bother me that much, but I know if I'd do the same thing, I would be fired and possibly charged with sexual harassment. I think that double standard bothers me more. A bunch of them constantly talk about people's sexuality. I don't really care, but they keep insisting I'm gay. Not in a negative way, because they always say, not that it's a bad thing. I guess it's just C-wordness more than anything else. Females in Australia have the yearly charity firefighter calendars up. These are shirtless calendars of muscle men. This is in a public service office in Australia. I'm not offended, but if I put up a bikini calendar, I would immediately be in trouble. Just make sure it's a charity bikini calendar. And no, not the kind where the woman is named Charity. Do not talk to men about how much you hate men. You put them in a lose-lose scenario. If they agree with you, they're self-hating. If they argue with you, you brand them as a chauvinist pig. So please, simply ask them, did you literally just come over here to talk to me about how much you hate people like me? Then they're in the position of having to defend themselves. Oh, I don't mean all men. You literally just said, I hate all men. Yeah, that's just a figure of speech. I just hate the sexist men. I didn't mean you. Now, I get it, and she didn't mean me, and I agree because sexist men were a constant hassle each and every day, but the word sexist in that phrase matters. It matters because I've had more than one friend go off the deep end on that phrase and forget that not all, insert gender here, is a terrible piece of crap. Collective grouping is lazy and leads to false conclusions. I hate when reps bat their eyes to try to convince you to go with their product over another. I will make my decision on efficacy and price, thank you very much, not on whether or not you'll give me an ocular pull job. I had a coworker who was sitting on a flimsy makeshift table and fell through it. He got stuck and the girls surrounded him and tried to take his wang out of his jeans. Pretty sure it made him uncomfortable because he shouted at them. To clarify, they weren't actually trying to take his wang out. They laughed and joked about it and fondled the general area of his zipper and tugged at his belt. One was shouting, "Get his belt! Get his belt!" The guy's name was Patrick and the book he was reading got ruined. Fell into a knocked-over bottle of Mountain Dew code red. Where do you work? He works from home. Wow, that is messed up. Poor guy. I work in an environment that's heavily female-dominant. Until our 2 new hires started yesterday, I was the only man in the office. Don't tell me the details about your life at home. I really can't explain in words how much I don't give an F about what your husband said that made you mad, or your dealings with so-and-so and that said something, and what you said in response. I get that women process stuff differently overall, and I know they aren't looking for solutions, they just want empathy, so I listen and put up with it. But there are 2 women on my team about whom I know far more than any man not married to them has a right to. General cattiness. For instance, this one old lady would complain about how the younger girls would dress like working girls, while she wore deep-cut blouses that showed her wrinkly old chest. I don't care what anyone wears, but I never understood that. I'm a younger female who's often worked in environments like this. I've never worked in environments that had dress codes except for things that would be safety issues, like wearing flip-flops, which was never really enforced, even. On a couple of occasions, at different places, I had co-workers, always middle-aged and female, get offended at something I wore, which was something modest. The older ones often wore things inappropriate, bra straps popping out, sheer clothing, too tight pants, etc. But I'm the one who offends people. Stop asking my opinion about their bodies, like asking if those clothes make their bosoms or butts look big. Stop asking about my feelings when I only ask you to send an email to the supervisor about some pressing issues with accounts. Please don't talk aloud in the rec room while we're at lunch. Your romantic life is not that important for an audience. Stop saying things like, "Imagine a guy like him," pointing at me, but with a bigger beer belly, and trying to guess our wang sizes solely based on our hands or feet. Don't use my shoulders to cry on because I look like your older brother when your last Tinder boyfriend slept with your friend. Oh, and don't show pictures of you wearing some lingerie and ask if your boyfriend will enjoy that treat. All these examples I pointed out happened along the years. I'm only in my mid-30s and along the years moved between jobs several times, and these are just some of the things I've remembered that if the genders were reversed would be made into a call to HR. Did your high school ever have an incident or event? What was it? My high school had some kind of scandal with a music teacher and an underage boy. The school's reputation was so trashed they had to change the name of the school to keep people from making the association. A student at my high school shot himself in the chest at lunchtime in front of his ex-girlfriend because she had broken up with him. He didn't survive. I used to live in the United States Virgin Islands on a smallish island called St. Thomas, and back in my freshman year, school was called off early within the first few periods of the day, and we weren't allowed to leave the buildings we were in until our parents came to pick us up. No one was really sure what was happening until SWAT teams pulled up to the school and started filing out along the street, and that's when word reached us that a Bengal tiger had escaped within the island, which was a surprise considering our nearest zoo catered to aquatic animals. Once my dad came to pick me up, I was escorted out of the school's gates with 2 SWAT members covering both sides, and as we left, learned that most of the main town had been occupied by SWAT teams, which I wasn't even aware we had on the island up until that point, with roadblocks set up here and there, all ready to stop themselves a tiger. The next day, however, we learned that there was not an escaped tiger on the island, but that there was instead a lost Bengal cat that had been named Tiger by its owner that was misprinted in the newspaper as being an actual tiger that caused a giant frickin' panic across the whole island. In conclusion, part of an island was shut down by a fricking house cat. Since there's been a few people asking if he was ever found, from what I can gather, the tiger has been missing to this day. Holy crap, I think you win the thread. My school was having a spirit week, and one of the days was superheroes and supervillains, like Marvel or DC. Someone came dressed in a full clan member outfit because she wanted to be a villain. Bunch of local news stations reported the story, and everyone in our area knew about it. My school had a spirit week, and one of the days was Heritage Day. Some African American kids thought it would be funny to dress up as slaves. We didn't have a Heritage Day the next year. Well, both of these stories were funny and incredibly effed up at the same time. Well done to everyone involved, and I hope none of them ever did it again. One kid dressed up as the Easter Bunny and was throwing candy off the senior balcony during a lunch period. I remember everyone being really excited until there was a fight over a specific candy bar. I've never been more excited to see teachers run after someone in a bunny suit in my entire life. That's some logic right there. People are fighting over a candy bar. Better chase the person who gave it to them. We had a fight week. 23 fights in 7 days. Doubled the cops at our school. A friend of mine and his girlfriend killed themselves within 2 days of each other after their breakup. It was horrible. RAM had just released Everybody Hurts, and they played it at the girl's funeral, to a group of high schoolers attending the second funeral of a fellow student in less than a week. It was rough. The speech and debate club was suspended for 2 years after it was revealed that the officers were embezzling club funds. I went to a very boring high school. Adult family members of an expelled student came to the school and in the middle of class proceeded to beat up the teacher who was the reason he was expelled, as well as the janitor who came to see what all the commotion was. Teacher had a bloody nose and janitor had to be taken out on a stretcher with several broken ribs. We had a kid at my high school who brought his dad in for one of his beefs. I don't know what it was over exactly. I think it was an underage girl, cue facepalm, but the bad dad in question went so far as to bring brass knuckles to the on-campus fight. Because all adults know that beating the crap out of some kid your son doesn't like is best done on a high school campus populated by cameras and actual cops. Rough town. Rumors went around that the one being beat up died because bad dad punched his face to a bloody pulp, but I can't believe this because high school. My college suspended some students for eating breakfast during a lecture. One of the students decided to upload the hilarious suspension letter in Facebook, which mentioned suspended for eating or something like that. The picture went viral, local media caught it, national media caught it. College's day of shame. Back in high school, a few grades above me, there were about 5 people who decided to have a mass adult fun time party, and they all ended up getting herpes. Well, people found out as they usually do, and from that point on, everyone in the area who heard my school's name instantly thought we all had herpes. Funnily enough, when on vacation in Colorado, a group I met at the same hotel from Texas had heard about my school's infamy somehow and thought it was hilarious. This was about 3 years after the incident, and my school was in Wisconsin. An assistant principal was arrested for killing his wife and trying to make it look like she took her own life. They made a Dateline or 48 Hours mystery about it. I can't remember. He was a pretty nice guy, but not to her, I guess. He was a pretty nice guy, but not to her, I guess? Understatement of the year. Our school stopped the yearly high school trip to Six Flags the year before I got to high school because someone, who I knew and was friends with my older brother, hopped off the Yosemite Sam ride and punched off Bugs Bunny's head. The cool guy Spanish teacher had a long-term relationship with multiple students, even paying for a few child terminations. That was like 10 years ago and I'd forgotten about it until a guy I knew from high school posted some new footage of the teacher shaking hands with Geraldo Rivera about 2 months ago. Not sure how he's not in prison. Bomb threat, kid threw acid on his friend's leg, basketball coach put a camera in the office and taped girls changing. How was that last school going after so much scandal? Jeepers creepers. It was 5th grade and recess after lunch had been cancelled because some parents complained about kids not having enough time to eat, even though you could be dismissed at any time by a teacher and could take as long as you wanted to eat. Everyone was upset, so this kid named Luke and a few of his friends decided we wanted to do something about it. Within minutes, everyone in the cafeteria was out of their minds, screaming, "We want recess!" swearing and throwing food at the lunch staff, and several people made a break for it and tried to run out of the lunchroom. Luke and a few others were suspended that day, and luckily their sacrifice meant that recess was reinstated for the rest of us. We now simply refer to the incident as the lunchroom riot. It never actually happened, but there was a rumor that there was going to be a shooting in my high school because somebody wrote on a bathroom stall in the department store next to the school that it was going to happen. And the best part of the day was seeing all the football team coaches standing around with baseball bats and nail boards. Senior class took fertilizer and other chemical agents to burn a giant dong into the football field. It could be seen on Google Maps for quite some time. I hear that you can do 2 different dongs in 2 different locations using different chemicals. One kills the grass now, one kicks in when the new term starts, but I can't remember what you were supposed to use. I'll bring this up for the 15-year reunion. During my sophomore year, the student body orchestrated a walkout because most of our electives were being cut to save money. Teachers who were losing their jobs also walked out with us. Classes like auto shop, wood shop, photography, home economics, all gone. The walkout did help as a few were reinstated the following year, while others were after my class graduated. My senior class did something similar. Our graduation date was being pushed back by 2 weeks so that we would graduate in the new auditorium that was being built. They informed us of this a month before our original graduation date. Since it's a tradition for seniors to go to Myrtle Beach the week after graduation, during senior week there, a lot of us had already made hotel reservations that would have cost money to cancel or change. What they didn't expect was for us to organize a sit-in in the cafeteria once the news broke. It lasted for an entire day until the newly elected superintendent showed up and told us that, while he respected what we were doing, that we'd better not pull anything like this again. We effectively got our graduation moved back to its original date and graduated in the gym while the next class was the first to graduate from the new auditorium. I don't know if it's relevant or not, but we were reading Animal Farm in AP English at the time, which may or may not have had a hand in our rebellion. Also, I know seniors reading Animal Farm in an AP English class is incredulous. I went to a public school in the poorest county in one of the poorest states in the US, West Virginia. Our teachers were constantly badgered to tailor their curriculum around material that would be covered on standardized tests. Higher or improved test scores meant that the school district would get more grant money. My school did frick all in terms of preparing us for higher education, and other than myself and a few close friends I still talk to, very few of us actually went on to get a degree. This girl posted on a transgender YouTube channel saying how she was going to blow up her high school and kill a lot of people. She described how she could do it because she was a student teacher, and she knew how to get away with it and kill the most people. The people on my channel notified police that tracked it down to my high school, and we had a huge lockdown because they had to check for any explosives. Well, that's certainly one way to get views on your channel, even if they are mostly coming from one police department. We had a PE teacher who'd done some awful things to some of the kids, who had left the year before I arrived. His replacement found this out, and instead of reporting this to the police and the school authorities, he wrote letters to all the parents of the children he thought were involved, and then went public to the newspapers. He got fired, and eventually, 6 years later, the former guy got imprisoned for 12 years. I was in my junior year, and it was finals week. Everyone usually gets to school about 20 minutes before class starts, and we just walk around the place talking with friends. Then all the teachers started ushering us all towards the road and away from the school. There was an active bomb threat. My high school was kind of a magnet school in a decent area, so we had no idea what was going on. Turns out some freshmen got scared and called in a bomb threat to get out of finals, on his own cell phone. We had fun though. One of my classmates was a DJ on the weekends. His pickup truck was a sort of convertible instant party, and he stood there killing it for over an hour. My high school used to allow every other year for the foreign language classes to go to that respective country over spring break. The school decided that the funds weren't there for it anymore, but still allowed people to go if they paid for it themselves and parents went with them. Anyway, the German class went to Germany, and of course the high school-age kids will drink over there. Well, the school caught wind and suspended all of them and kicked them out of National Honor Society. The uproar was insane. The school no longer sanctioned the trip nor paid, so they didn't have the right to do that, since it wasn't during school time. One of the parents of the students is very rich. They threatened the school by not giving their annual donation. Sure enough, all the students were reinstated. Wait, what? The school would allow them to go on a private vacation on their own time with their own money? Did the school also have the power to say, "Frick you, Colin, you're not allowed to visit your grandma this weekend"? One kid died in my gym class. We were doing a swimming lesson, so everyone was in the pool doing some laps, learning how to do the different strokes. After some laps, the gym teacher had us get out of the pool. A minute or so goes by, and someone shouts that there's someone at the bottom of the pool. I don't know if the gym teacher froze up or what, but it was a few seconds before a student finally dove in to drag him out of the pool. The teacher finally snaps out of it and tries to start CPR, and yells for someone to grab the defibrillator from the hallway. He tries to revive the kid, but it was too late, unfortunately. The kid was taking some meds, not sure what he was taking, maybe something for ADD or depression, but the autopsy came back showing he'd overdosed on whatever he was taking, so it was a deliberate taking of his own life. The kid overdosed before gym class, knowing that we were swimming in the pool. It was a really sad day, to say the least. Back in middle school, a deer got spooked by one of the school buses and jumped through the classroom window and started wandering the halls. My class then constructed a plan for if that ever happened again. It did not. A part of me hopes that the plan involved the principal suplexing the deer. Since people have been asking, the plan was to designate two people to throw the desks at the deer. One throws theirs high and the other throws theirs low. I was not picked as one of the throwers, unfortunately, but that's probably a good thing since I probably would have just cowered in the corner and not fulfilled my part of the plan. A guy decided to hang himself in the graveyard next to the school in full view of all the students. This being a religious school, they took it extremely seriously, doing mandatory class therapy sessions and crap when half the school didn't even see the body. There was also an abusive teacher there at the time who would threaten to or actually hit the kids for teeing him off. Not sure how he kept his job for so long. Eventually, he did lose it because he was having inappropriate conversations with a student over Snapchat. Always knew something was up with him. A fight broke out in the middle of the hallway while we were switching classes. Everyone crowded around to watch. The school cop burst in about a minute later and tased one of the guys fighting. He hit the floor and a bunch of kids started screaming that he had heart problems and to stop. A kid next to me exclaimed, "Oh crap, they're tasing people!" And he took off down the hallway running at full speed. He hit a corner and slid, falling flat on his face, and a gallon of milk fell out of his backpack and splattered all over the floor. To this day, I don't know why that kid had a gallon of milk at school. This story was more or less C grade and par for the course until the milk came out of the backpack, which has upgraded it to a solid A. Well done, Milk Kid. This is actually kind of a saga. Luckily, it didn't happen directly to me. I grew up in a small rednecky town in midwestern Wisconsin. Think about the stereotype that brings up and you're pretty much on the level as to how it really was at the time I was there. It was one of those small schools that housed all the K-12 students in the same building, but separate wings, although we used the same lunchroom. My class was the biggest on record up until then, and we had something like 80 students in it. I was actually in middle school when this happened, so early 90s, but one of the two high school English teachers was a man named Gene Doonigan. Gene was like the stereotype right out of the Wonder Years, horn-rimmed glasses and all. Gene was frickin' mean as a motherfricker. He was one of those buttholes who would grab and twist your ear and lead you down to the main office himself. Happened to me once, and I wasn't even his student. My crime was not having all 4 of my chair legs on the ground. He made sure it hurt. Gene was also a drunk. He eventually got fired because he was wasted in class. Some high schooler mouthed off to him, and he punched the kid full-on in the face. Poor guy was wearing glasses, which of course broke, and the cuts he got from the glass needed stitches. But it doesn't end there. This was a small town, remember, and Gene was also the sitting town judge. He didn't lose that position, and my particular town had one of those incestuous police departments, and Gene was basically the guy calling the shots for them. He had always had a reputation for forming personal grudges and using the PD to stake them out and try to bust them for something. He especially did this to what he considered the undesirables in the school, basically the ones who looked like they used substances, who, to be honest, were usually substance users, but he didn't like the metalheads either. With nothing more to do with his time, he went all out on the kids in town he didn't like. This went on for years, but I don't have any personal stories because my mom was a town clerk and I was somehow immune from being harassed. A lot of my friends weren't. Well anyways, eventually he retired from that, and almost immediately he was arrested for trying to do the unspeakable act with an autistic kid. He was convicted and died in prison. It was a sweet satisfaction that happened. Our high school stopped having dances because one girl gave a guy head during an event and got caught. Turns out it was my sister's best friend at the time. I like to think my sister was much classier than that. People are asking which school. I'm tempted not to say just to rustle some jimmies. A few, I guess. Dead pig left in a Tesco bag in the sports field. It was break time, various teens ran out to play football, and there it was, a dead pig in a bag. A guy in my year fell out of his bedroom window trying to smoke sneakily. A graffiti tribute was made on one of the school buildings and promptly removed as it was vandalism. A girl in the year below mine had an affair with a school bus driver, resulting in several child terminations and a certain bus driver being suspended. Changing rooms were set on fire. I was off ill on the day, returned to school the following day to find everyone had detention until somebody owned up. I feel it was rather unfair that I was detained when I was off sick. Labs set on fire and copper wire stolen, but we know who did it and they got suspended. 2 teachers had nervous breakdowns and went stark raving loony in front of the students before quitting the teaching profession. We had a presentation about tolerance, which was stupid as my school was super laid back, people had issues, but not about race or gender, in our auditorium. This was in 2009, just after Obama's election. At one point, the group is on stage and making small talk to us. Guy on stage, "We got a new president. President Obama. How do you guys feel about that?" Or some stupid pandering crap. Guy in the crowd stands and shouts, "We don't need a frickin' N-word in the White House." Holy crap, dude. I was in the upper bowl next to some of the black and Latino kids. This kid says his piece and everybody next to me is on him, like 35 feet between us and a flight of stairs. This kid gets the crap beat out of him. Teachers finally managed to pull everybody off. Kid has to be taken to the hospital, luckily nearby. Afterwards, we realized that we had no idea who the kid was. Turns out he was with the group and was supposed to say that as a thought-provoking kind of thing about how offensive and hurtful racism is. They didn't tell any of the staff about this. The presentation went on fine, but nobody was paying attention anymore. We were all furious. He was okay, by the way. None of my class got in trouble. They apologized afterwards. Also, we were mostly a white school, maybe 60%, and it wasn't just the black kids jumping on him. Mexicans, whites, whatever. After it happened, they said they stopped doing that bit. Next stop was apparently Chicago, so good call. Classmate slapped his girlfriend for going to a dance with someone else. A couple of days later, she was not in school. During math, her mum comes in and says to my classmate, "You took a piece of my heart, and now I'm going to take a piece of yours." And then she pulls out a Crocodile Dundee-sized Bowie knife, tells everyone to leave, and starts chasing him around the room with it, while he and the teacher threw desks at her. No, the girl didn't kill herself. The mum just kept her home because she was going to try to get all stabby at school. The mum went to prison. Oh, and some kids were playing with bits of sodium or potassium in chemistry class by throwing it in the sink and watching it fizzle. It's normally stored under oil because it reacts in air and violently with water. One kid pocketed it, and they took it to the locker room to throw bigger bits in the toilet. They heard someone coming, panicked, and threw the whole thing in and flushed. It blew the toilet into pieces. Years ago, my school was accused of promoting slavery because of a book included in our curriculum. I think the book was called Slavery, as it was, if I recall correctly. Newsworthy. Reporters were outside our school for about a week. ABC News called for a comment. Students were instructed not to talk to any of the reporters. The rumors got really exaggerated, but it originated from an angry parent. Eventually, it blew over. Not high school, but 8th grade. Me and the whole boys' PE class was pulled out of class for a day so the teachers could sniff out the ninja crapper. Apparently someone was stealth crapping in as many places as they could get away with. It happened in the school hallway, the urinals, the girls' bathroom, the walls, the cafeteria. If you named it, the ninja crapper had probably crapped there. The school never figured out who did it, and this went on for over a month. What's the most disturbing thing you've seen when performing a background check on someone? The place at which I'm a board member fired someone this week for social media, posting pictures of vulnerable individuals and making fun of people with Down syndrome on a personal Facebook. A family member notified staff about the posting. The staff member thought it was outrageous to be fired from the Camp for Special Needs Kids for the posts. "I can't believe I frickin' work with handicapped people all day." You're fired." "Oh, but boss, I wasn't insulting the differently abled." "Oh?" "I was talking about you." I wouldn't necessarily call it disturbing, but it was the deciding factor in not hiring somebody. We interviewed a guy for an entry-level position. His interview went well, and the other 2 people on the hiring committee were enthusiastic about him, but something about him bothered me. I don't normally check applicants out on Facebook, but I decided to in this case. His most recent post was something to the tune of, "Just got fired again, this is so much bullcrap." Someone asked him in the comments what happened, and his response was, "It was my 3rd no-call, no-show. I was too hungover to bother. Those buttholes had it coming for scheduling me right after a holiday." Entitled, irresponsible, and daft enough to broadcast it in a public post? Sign me up. I've had applicants say this kind of crap to my face in an interview. So what you're saying is that your last 4 employers were all out to get you? Seems plausible with no other explanation. A guy who said he had an assault charge 15 years ago. He wasn't lying, but that was the start of 27 pages of criminal history that included 2 years of incarceration, during which time his app said he was self-employed as a carpenter. The history was predominantly assaults, thefts, and possession of illegal substances. I had never seen 27 pages of criminal history on one person. I will add this though, he actually did turn his life around. He ended up working at the gym I went to and then got an additional job at a seafood distributor. I would never have guessed that he was the guy that would turn it all around, but he did. We had a guy interview a couple of months ago who claimed he had a couple of DUIs in the past. Job doesn't require driving, so not a deal breaker, and they schedule him for a substance screening and physical. Then his background check came back. He didn't have a couple of DUIs, he had 13, along with numerous convictions for theft, assault, domestic violence, substances, etc., totaling 65 pages. He was promptly called and had the job offer rescinded. Boy, feels like you either get none or you get all of the quirks at once in some of these cases. Or the ones who only have a couple of minor offenses aren't problematic enough to be reported here, I suppose. He was hired before I started, much before, but I'd been doing an audit for our files and I noticed his background check had a conviction for his behavior with children, or something like that in the 80s. This was a man my boss regularly had play Santa at Christmas parties, where the children would sit on his lap. This was the moment I realized the president of the company was a fricking moron. But that guy got fired for insubordination like a year or so ago, so there's that. Frick, background checks for anyone that works with children. Not an employer, but I handle work comp claims. Just had a guy complaining complete incapacity while going on 4 trips to Asia and back, as well as hyping his business all on his Facebook page. Just sent a subpoena for his business records, so that should be fun. I used to work in a department that did background checks on potential childcare employees. One guy had been charged with assault of a minor by instrumentation when he worked at a church daycare and had subsequently been let go and charged. He was out on bail and applying to work in a different church daycare. The problem was that he'd only been charged and there was no conviction yet, so he didn't show up on any of the registries. I don't remember how I found out about the charge, but it was an accident. I think it was maybe a newspaper article or something. If an employer checked my background in Facebook, they would just see what a boring life I have. And you're hired. With minimum pay. Mine would just see a bunch of random posts that my mum tags me in, like 4+ a day, and nothing else. Not so much Facebook, but I will Google people. I Googled an applicant we interviewed and seemed to like. Unfortunately, their top results were losing their nursing credentials for writing fake prescriptions for controlled substances. A few years back. And a recent police arrest for driving under the influence and having prescription substances without a prescription. It actually made me sad as they seemed likable, but off. Unfortunately, not in a place to risk trusting someone with such a poor history of judgment and addiction issues. Question. I deleted all of my social media accounts. Is it a red flag to not be involved in social media? No, employees might think you're just hard to find, or if your name is common enough that they can't find the right John Smith. I get assigned interns to work with me based on a term or year from the university nearby. I make it a habit to do a quick Facebook search so I'll recognize their faces from the dozen of other interns when they come in. Lots of party pics, smoking green herb, which is legal here, so in the same realm as those party pics, and women in almost no clothing. Also, lots of mirror ab shots, though my field is largely female-dominated. All I look for is the profile picture, I don't do any digging. All the interns I've actually seen get hired have had very normal profile pictures. You know, smiling, with friends, on a hike, etc. Not because of their pics, but because they're the kind of people who understand professional versus private life, and what is appropriate for public viewing. I was doing background checks for the British Airport Authority during a massive hiring drive in 2007, after there was an attempt to drive a car full of gas canisters into the terminal of Glasgow Airport by 2 Islamic extremists. Due to the need to hire several thousand staff in a few months, the normal requirements relating to job stability, etc., were relaxed, so people who hadn't worked in 10 to 20 years were getting interviewed, which led to a few interesting ones. The only one which I can remember in detail was a guy from Belfast. He hadn't worked since 1990, but they were willing to give him a chance. When we checked his history, he had spent 5 years in HMP, the Maze, due to being convicted of terror offences, before being released as part of the Good Friday Agreement. It turned out that the guy spent his life applying to jobs with long recruitment processes that he couldn't get due to his particular conviction, as that meant he was seen as an active job seeker and wouldn't lose his benefits. Remember Trainspotting when Renton tells the interviewers that he's a smack addict? Similar to that. Strangely enough, he wasn't invited for an interview. In short, a convicted NRA terror fighter applied for a job designed to catch people like him. I work for a background screening company. We do not do social media checks, though we are incredibly thorough, because it can lead to a world of problems. For instance, if you find out that an applicant is gay and deny him the job because he has a criminal record or something, not because he's a homosexual, he can claim discrimination and sue. Consumers have to be provided a copy of their background check after the research is done, so they will see that a social media search was conducted. I hope this makes sense. We do not look for sexual orientation, gender, race, etc. This is a hypothetical situation that explains why not to look at social media for a job. There you go, folks. If you're going to put something suspicious on your social media, make sure you also have posts that align you as some sort of discriminated group. This is why my profile is private and my pic is obscure or of me in a costume, so you're not 100% sure it's me. You frickin' furry. Pictures of them smoking green herb or being belligerently drunk. Not that I personally care, but you're just asking for trouble, especially if you're going into a public sector job. Think of it as a reference. Only you're the one giving the feedback on yourself. I actually had one kid who's had a profile picture which was him in the buck, cupping his Johnson with the caption, "Pricks out for Harambe." Did I mention he had applied for our marketing and social media internship? For your information, this was in New York, so unfortunately Herb is still illegal. Not sure if anyone understands what public sector means, but this kid was going to be a state employee. You can see the issue. Uncle Sam gives us a checklist of red flags to look out for. Flat Earth, Jack could have fit on the door, moon landing wasn't real, Harambe was murdered, pineapple goes on pizza, wrestling isn't real, Ken Bone was a hero, Ryan Lochte actually got robbed, Coney 2012, the dress was white and gold. If we see any of these, it's an automatic disqualification. This was actually on MySpace back in the day. I was hiring for a position that involved review of patient medical records in a hospital setting, and as you can imagine, involved a great deal of confidentiality and discretion by the person hired for the position. One of the applicants worked at a bank, but had some prior experience in the medical field, so I was considering her for the position. I checked out her MySpace page and found tons of pictures of her in the bank vault, in her undies, posing suggestively with large amounts of money. The contents of the pictures themselves didn't bother me so much as her complete lack of discretion and stupidity in posting these pictures publicly where any of her employers might have found them. I was disgusted thinking about what she might have done with others' private health information if we had hired her. We had a 40-something lady apply, and whilst doing the usual checks, we went to her Facebook to find her profile picture is of her husband, and her daughter at a swingers party, all completely au naturel, and her with a different man behind her. We were dumbstruck. Second-degree murder. We didn't hire. I'm not an employer, but a few years after I resigned from a job that I'd worked at for years, I found I needed to contact my old GM. I called where I used to work and discovered he had quit, so I decided to look him up online. That's when I discovered that the guy I was working for prior to him becoming my GM had 2 crystal convictions under his belt. I can't judge though, he was one of the most awesome people I've ever worked for. I just thought it was funny. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. I was trying to hire a nanny. This girl sends me her application. Everything looks really good. So I put her phone number into Facebook to see what it's like and add her to mine. Her background photo is a girl, on all fours with a bra and panties on and a guy about to do a line off her butt. I was going to send her an email saying, due to your Facebook page, I won't be interviewing you. My husband told me not to help out other parents she's trying to get a job from. I'm a nanny, and I make sure my Facebook is squeaky clean. Granted, I'm a squeaky clean kind of person, but I always think about what I'm posting pictures of, or what or how that will reflect on me. It doesn't help that my last 2 bosses and their parents all asked to add me on Facebook, and my current boss sent me a friend request. But I guess it says something about me when the last 2 families love me enough to want to keep up with me and still include me in their lives. All they see is cute smiling pictures of me and cats. Lots of pictures of cats. I teach small children. I live in the looming fear that my students will learn I have vices like drinking and swearing. Everything is friends locked except for some generic, watch me do completely normal things, photos and quotes. The rule I tell younger people is it something you're comfortable with your boss, grandparents, or a small child seeing? I had a reference once tell me that they had let the guy go for stalking his ex-wife from the company phones. That was his reference. One guy was a huge Phillies fan. End of story. I check Facebook for all my hires. I love the ones who have their page public, so I get to see all of their crazy. Seriously, why try to get a job when you've worked at 10+ jobs in the past year and laugh when you get fired for not doing your job? Or when you post videos of doing stupid crap at work? Or talking about your substance use and partying every night? Or baby daddy drama? Or like when you keep getting locked up in a county jail over and over. Or when you leave a ton of negative reviews of other small businesses acting like servers are your servants when you're applying for a server position. Or baby mama drama. Or these are just the ones I remember off the top of my head, and all of these are actual things I've seen. FYI, be smart people, hide that crap. I once started to do business with someone and decided to check their Facebook. Multiple walls of text about B and C words they had to work with pictures of the individual looking tough to the camera. I figured that when you have beef with everyone you work with, you're a problem. I cut off business after they failed to even show up for our first meeting. It's not disturbing, but a good story. Before my company had HR, I did the interviews with a couple of other people. I interviewed this girl who seemed like a good fit. After the interviews, I looked her up on Facebook. She had just posted, "I just had a job interview. I think it went well. The pay is crap though. The pay wasn't crap considering she had no experience, so my first thought was the obvious. I'm not going to hire her. Later that evening I was in Target and I happened to see her working there. She didn't see me. She had this big smile on her face and was the aura of someone who was very positive. The next day, I did hire her. 5 years later, she worked her way up pretty high. She has an awesome career in digital marketing now. She has no idea. The pay being fair doesn't preclude it also being crap. Likely she was talking crap to her friends to sound cool rather than being legitimately ungrateful. Not disturbing, the opposite. We interviewed a kid who was a total bag of nerves but seemed good, otherwise. Just bad at interviews. When we looked him up, his Facebook said something like, "Crashed and burned in an interview today, really down, I would have loved to get that job." We had a big discussion about whether it was genuine, but I figured if he was playing us, it was worthy of a reward anyway. He worked out great. Illegal discharge of a piece from a moving vehicle which caused great bodily harm. Man, why bother trying when we said no felons? My boss interviewed him to maybe find out if it was an accident. Nope. He shot his brother in a heated argument after a drive-by they did together. Said brother is now a quad. It's for a bail bondsman agency too. Moron. I am not a manager, but most of my team participates in interviewing potential teammates. I was preparing for an interview and I routinely Google their names to see what comes up. In the past, I've been pleasantly surprised to find industry-related accolades that the applicant was too humble to list on their resume. But this time, I came up with a long string of blog posts. I got sucked into the rabbit hole at that point, and the next 2 hours were spent reading all of these blog entries about this wife who was involved in widespread internet trolling and bullying. There were websites dedicated to how horrible this woman was, people invested in domain names related to the message, and paid for hosting just to call her out. So I was left with quite the dilemma. As a result of her bullying, her victims and opponents had dedicated quite a bit of time to doxing her, and as a result her husband and his employer. I figured that I would hold on to this information and only inform my boss if we all felt he was a solid candidate that we would hire. The guy came in for the interview, and while I was asking him questions the whole time, I was thinking about his insane wife, but not saying a word. He somehow worked into the conversation that he'd recently divorced, which at the moment further complicated the issue in my mind. When we met as a team after the interviews to discuss how he'd performed, my boss said he wasn't impressed with his responses to the technical questions and didn't seem like a good fit for the team, which was a huge relief to me. I'm not certain what the right call would have been if he had been a good fit. It would be wrong to judge him based upon his ex-wife's actions, but if there's an army of people on the internet targeting her husband's employer in efforts to get him fired, that can be a headache to deal with. Had an intern that was working with our social media marketing group. She put in a really hateful ticket about how she needed Facebook open on the web gateway filter for her job. So one of the guys on our team looked her up on social media just kind of interested. Here was a big long post about how incompetent IT was at my company and how she had to get on her personal cell phone to browse. We all thought her boss should see her post. She was gone the next day. Seriously, you talk crap about the boss's backs to friends and family, not in a place the bosses will find out. Seemed like an average kid, but the entire Twitter feed was furry adult content. Not an employer and not about me, but my mother does check some of her customers out on Facebook for her Amazon and eBay deals. She's a third-party seller on both sites. She once got an order and looked on the person's Facebook. The person was bragging repeatedly there about how she had scammed multiple Amazon sellers out of inventory and got her money back. She cancelled the order for the textbook via Amazon. The customer asked her why she cancelled it. Mom reported that customer and pointed it out to the customer. She shouldn't have her Facebook set on public mode if she wanted to scam sellers. I heard that customer was banned from Amazon soon after that. Oh boy, I once interviewed a guy for an entry-level manufacturing position. He was in his mid-30s, I guess, and he seemed alright, if not a little socially awkward, and mentioned he wanted the job because he had a baby on the way and wanted something solid as he was picking up odd jobs with relatives' companies. This job required basically no skill, so we hired nearly everyone we interviewed. After he left, I went back to my desk and looked him up on Facebook. He was obsessed with Rihanna. Photoshopped himself into pictures with her, had her as his cover photo, and had a lot of softcore adult content with her head photoshopped onto the models. Nearly every one of his status updates were about her. It was freaking weird as heck. The kicker, though, was that his profile picture was him with a photoshopped picture of a pregnant Rihanna with his hand on her belly. He did not get a call back. You know what? I'm starting to think that he might not have actually had a baby on the way. Used to be a staffing consultant and had to background check everyone. Had somebody with first-degree murder pop up. That was pretty weird considering we do the backgrounds while they're in the office. Had another guy have a B&D pop up, and he wanted to explain. He and some friends broke into a co-op and put all the feed against the door so the owner couldn't get in. It was meant to be a prank, and now it's on his record. My supervisor wouldn't let us hire him, which I thought was lame. Don't do dumb things as adults, kids. I interviewed a guy in his late 50s. He hadn't worked for years as he had been a single parent to 4 kids. He passed the interview, support position working with elderly people. We then went on to discuss a DBS check, which is where you check any criminal record. He said it would be fine, he didn't have a record. He then asked me how long records stay on the system for. I said, "What am I looking for? Forever." "Oh," he said. "Well, I do have something to admit to. My wife said I shouldn't say anything about it, but I guess I'll have to. When my first wife left, I couldn't work because of the kids, so I got involved in adult films. I'm not sure how, but it led to films involving the kids, and I was sent to prison." The room went silent. I honestly did not know what to say. I was just aware that I was in a room, alone, in an empty office with this disgusting, vile man. He must have known and said, "I'll take it I haven't got the job." I said, "Sorry, no." And he left. I wish I'd said more, but I was so shocked and a bit scared. Red pill and racist pages they've liked or commented on. Some guy had an incredible resume and interviewed really well. Then we saw his comment on Mexicans and one particular recent school shooting. Yeah, we passed. Not an employer, but when I was working at my last job, my supervisor would always come up in my suggested friends. I'm quiet and reserved, so she was probably curious. I had a goofy Mimi profile picture and a cover photo of Louis Theroux at the time. Don't think it would have been too disturbing. I recently took a promotion and I'm working on my replacement in my prior role. The job requires you to be extremely reliable and able to work with generally no supervision. We're taking our time and doing several levels of interviews as well as informal meetings such as dinners or lunches. Those tend to catch people off guard and I get free food. 2 weeks ago, I was poking around a lady's Facebook page, and most of it was pretty normal, until I found her comment on an article about a cop shooting a dog. She referenced the owners of the dog as monkeys. These people were African American and sided with the cop on shooting the chained-up dog. Her profile was extremely professional except for the article comments. The monkey comment was just the tip. This lady was a full-bore racist. Ex-prisoners. What's the most disturbing thing you've ever heard or witnessed from a fellow prisoner? As the narrator, I feel inclined to warn people that there are some pretty extreme descriptions of violence in these posts. I really mean it. I've done a few grim videos in the past, but there was at least one story here that I had to take a long walk after. You've been warned. One of the women I was in with was in for life. The reason that she was in was because someone had sold her fake smack, so she had decided to murder this person. She goes to their house, cuts the gas line, and burns the house down. Turns out she had the wrong house and killed an entire family in their sleep. She tried to punk me out a few times, but I don't take people seriously if we can't communicate, like intelligent human beings. She was obviously trying to avoid herself in all areas. It was really sad. Had a pool table while locked up. Nobody used the cues or balls to do stuff, because if you got our pool table taken away, you'd better hope they took you away from us too. If fights drew blood, everyone would come out of the woodwork with their little hand towels to clean up all the blood before the COs would come out. I have a very funny image in my head of several thuggish dudes cleaning up blood from a fight. "Oh, you missed a spot, Reggie. Sorry about that, Todd. I'll get right on that." 6 months in Rikers Island, New York. Watched a girl try to drown herself in her cell toilet for 2 hours, just running her head in, trying to stay under, while COs stood and laughed. When they left, she peed on the floor to flood the cell to get their attention again. Not a prisoner, but my professor works with prisoners. She told us she had this client that had recently got out of jail, telling her that the most enjoyable thing in prison was the group's therapy session. He said, "I really love the group therapy because it gave me ideas of other people's emotions when confessing their crimes. It taught me the emotions I'm supposed to feel when confessing in court again to reduce my sentence next time." She was really surprised that this serial killer is that honest, and she was really spooked at the same time. Oh god, there's someone taking acting courses in prison for how to get a shorter sentence so that they can get back out and commit more crimes quicker. I went to jail for about 3 weeks because of driving with a suspended license. We all slept in these huge rooms with bathroom and living area connected. About a week in, I hear some guy get up and use the small microwave that we're given in the living area to make stuff hot like ramen. It's not normal for the microwave to be used after lights out, but I figured that maybe he had a roll or something he wanted to heat up and munch on before sleeping. The guard posted on the far wall never said anything to him or even got up from his seat, though I could tell from my bunk he was watching the inmate. So the guy comes back to the bed area and walks right past me with his bowl in his hands. I close my eyes and try to go to sleep, but the silence is shattered by a blood-curdling scream from a couple of rows down. The guy had filled a bowl with baby oil and heated it till boiling, and then poured it on some guy's face in his sleep. Found out later that I had some kind of fight a few days earlier, and the baby oil guy was out for revenge. Burn guy had third-degree burns on his face, neck, shoulders, and chest. Baby oil guy was taken away, and we never heard from him again. Also, we lost our microwave, so to heat things up we had to use hot water from the sink and just let stuff sit in it forever to heat it up. Sucked to be sure, but not as bad as being covered in boiling fricking oil. This is why you can't have nice things in prison. My dad was telling me about how in the POW camp in Colditz in World War II, officers had to eventually ban fricking everything because stuff was being used to either smuggle in contraband or be used as tools for escape and whatnot. Pretty much the only luxury the prisoners had was fruit jam, until a man was found in the yard one day, blinded by the moonshine that was made from it. So this jam was banned too. Well, they may have taken 99% of our luxuries, but at least we still have the delicious jam? Actually. Oh god damn it, Barry. I was in a holding cell for unpaid tickets once. It was way overcrowded. They brought in a new guy who complained right as he entered. Hell no. There are too many people in here, man. He sat quietly for a few minutes while another inmate talked crap to the annoyance of most everyone else. Finally, the new guy, who was bigger than anyone else in the cell and clearly the most veteran inmate, walked up to the talker guy. Sorry, man, I ain't sitting in here no more. It's too crowded. You need to shut the frick up. He then punched talker guy in the face and then went to the door and started pounding it. Guard, I just punched this dude. Come get me. The guards were already on their way, and as they pulled him out, he left with these words of wisdom and commands to the guards. Y'all take me to solitary. I take the assault rap because it's too frickin' crowded and hot in here. It's inhumane to keep so many people in here. Take me to solitary. I envied his clever escape and reminded myself that I was only there for a traffic ticket, and as much as solitary sounded like heaven, it might not be worth emulating his departure strategy. Never been to prison, but when I worked in the ER, I saw a lot of prisoners come in with all sorts of injuries, but two really stand out. The first one was a guy who was shanked in the abdomen and his intestines were literally hanging out. I remember he was stone-faced and wasn't saying anything. Just looked straight ahead. I'm sure he'd been given pain meds, but still. We slid him on the stretcher and I remember I went to move him up the bed a little bit and as soon as I started to slide him up, he grabbed my arm and said, "Hold up a minute, homie, that hurts a little bit," in the most nonchalant voice I've ever heard. The second was a guy who tried to kill himself by stripping into the buck and just laying on the cold floor for hours. The floor was so cold it ended up dropping his core temperature to around 92 degrees Fahrenheit. A quiet kid we called Harry Potter because of his glasses. He was pretty young and definitely lacking in street smarts, and we could never figure out why he was there, until we caught the news from a guard that he threw a pot of boiling water on his wheelchair-bound grandma because she was being too loud while he watched his favorite TV show. Out of all the sick crap people were locked up for, that one is pretty hard to swallow. If you ever got locked up, remember to always be respectful of those around you because you never know what kinds of messed up people are in there with you. Stories I've heard firsthand, one guy was locked up with a heap of smack still shoved up his butt. He was popular. Another guy got noticeably drunk on someone else's booze, prompting a lockdown and search. He died from a head injury a few days later. Another group of guys teased the necrophiliac until he had a breakdown and chased them through prison trying to kill them. They hid behind a guard, peeing themselves, laughing while he was subdued. Fun times. I was in juvenile prison. I'd just gotten into the intake unit. The guy that was escorted into the building behind me had committed the unspeakable act. Well, we walked into the unit and some kid walks up to him and starts beating his face. He takes out a toothbrush and starts shoving it up his butt. The COs didn't let that go on too long, but it caused some serious damage. Well, some guys from the unit told me he crapped himself and couldn't control it. Turns out the guy that beat up the crapping boy was the older brother of the boy that had the unspeakable act committed against him by Crap Boy. The most disgusting thing I saw and smelled was when I was on lockup. This one inmate took a coffee bag, filled it with 3-week-old bodily fluids. He then gets out for his 1-hour rec and proceeds to place the open part underneath this other guy's cell door and stomp on the bag. It sprayed the most disgusting, rancid concoction of bodily fluids all over this inmate. After his epic display of biological warfare, he pulled down his pants and shook his wang at the inmates he had just crapped all over. As the man writing this script, I can tell you that you do not want to know the specific fluids that the author wrote that went into the bag. But it was all of them. Whatever you're thinking, it was all in there in a nasty cocktail. Gross. I pleasured myself in a holding cell, not knowing there were cameras watching me. 2 officers walked in telling me to put my wang away because there was a lady watching me on the cameras. Honestly, I was so mortified that I forgot that I was about to get reamed in court. How in the heck did you get in the mood to crank it before court in a holding cell? What the frick else am I supposed to do? 20 hours on a wooden bench with no shoes on, and the floor is so nasty you don't even want to touch it. Ah, the old forlorn nut. Caught guilty of underage drinking. A guy that was there when I got there gets up after an hour or so of me coming in. He goes and sits down on the toilet that's in the same small room as the 10 of us guys that were there, right in front of the window to the officer's desk area/office, and has explosive diarrhea. It's horrible, breathing through our shirts for 2 hours. New guy comes in and is told from an experienced player that he should try and make himself throw up so he won't be in as long. They release you when you're sober. So what's he do? Puts his drunk head into the toilet bowl, rests his face on the seat, and passes out. It was a gross, gross day. Obligatory, not me, but someone I know. They went to federal prison in Ontario for getting caught with a lot of substances. Anyway, he told me that they put smack addicts in with the general population, but they're given a small cup of methadone each morning at a certain time, and they'd sit in the chair and wait for their bodies to absorb it. What some guys would do, though, was shake in their chairs to try and stave off the absorption, and then when they'd get back in their cells later, they'd induce vomiting into a sock inside of a can and use that as a filter. Then it was for sale. Yeah, doing regurgitated smack is a thing in Canadian prison. Severe violence and death of an infant warning. I did a few years in a state prison and saw and heard a lot of brutal, crazy stuff. Murders, the unspeakable acts, fatal amounts of substance use, riots. But the one thing that's never left me was a story a guy told me about his murder case. He was babysitting his girlfriend's new baby, a few months old, and the baby wouldn't stop crying, so he put it in a pillowcase and slammed it against a wall for 20 minutes. He said he knew the baby was messed up after the first hit, but he just kept going. Said it was like a bloody pulp sack. Stuff really messed me up. Also, one of the other bad ones I saw was a guy get stabbed through the eye with a 10-inch knife. Dude dropped, killing him instantly, and he never saw it coming. A couple of people put him in a laundry cart, and the COs didn't find him for about 10 hours. The guy who killed him was 19 and serving an 11-month sentence. He said he just wanted to know what it felt like to kill someone. They convicted him, federal, for capital murder, and he got like 99 years. Unfortunately, there's a lot of young kids who go in with small sentences and never get out. Worked at a maximum security mental health facility. A guy talked about how he didn't understand why he was having nightmares about boiling lobsters alive. This was 5 minutes after he talked about how he killed his ex-girlfriend, cut her up, and boiled her head because she was accusing him of cheating. Oh, and how if he could just talk to her parents, they would understand because she wasn't a good person. I was in administrative isolation, and there was a guy across the way who kept smearing his crap on the plexiglass so the COs couldn't see inside. The guards were sick of his crap, quite literally, so one night when he did it, the CO on watch dared the guy to lick his own poop off the glass. He did. Christmas time in jail. It may have been Christmas Eve, not sure. Many years ago. Night time. Around 8 p.m, I guess. They had huts, which could sleep about 20 guys each. I was in the short-timers hut. For some reason they called the long-timers long sweeps. No idea why. Anyway, a bunch of long sweepers started gathering around our hut, just outside the chain-link fence. Massive guys, tats on arms, and even fingers, and all carrying a little something in their fist. Group gets up to about 12 guys, all standing around silently, saying nothing, and we were getting pretty nervous. Then, just as it gets dark, a couple of little possums crawl down out of one of the trees. Little Aussie sugar gliders. Yeah, they really can fly or glide between the trees. Here's a bunch of the biggest, baddest dudes I've ever seen, standing around waiting to hand-feed little possums bread and sugar. They were very gentle with them. My brother told me a story about pre-prison when he was in jail. He bunked with a substance addict who was seemingly just dope sick as frick. He said he was moaning and groaning all night. He tried to tell the COs he needed help, but they ignored him, left him be. Then he puked all over himself, and the COs still wouldn't help him. They just left him there all pukey. Then after a while he started seizing. He had 2 seizures. COs did nothing. They thought he was faking. My brother said about an hour later he stopped making noises. He was silent, so he checked on him. He was grey and unresponsive, totally slipped away. Fricking buttholes let a technically innocent man die of benzo withdrawal overnight. I've seen COs ignore a man who was having a seizure on 3 different occasions. Also same man every time. It was the scariest thing to witness someone dropping and having a seizure, and the guards were just laughing it off like, "Don't worry, this happens every time he's here." It was fricked up. They did get him help, but they didn't seem to care too much either. Oh, I have one. My friend was a former medical assistant at a local prison. She told me a pretty gross story that happened a while back. One of the inmates, a male, was being manipulated by one of the COs. The CO made the inmate give him oral, and when he tried to tell someone about it, no one believed him. So after the end of oral, the inmate saved the semen in his mouth, spit it in a napkin, and had his family send out the semen to get tested, and that's how the CO was caught. It was on the news and everything, I'm pretty sure. Honestly, as awful as that story is, I'm just glad to be posting one that has an element of justice in it, since most of these are stories of just the awful stuff that goes on inside these places. Mum was a CO at Hancock State Penitentiary in Georgia. Here are my favorite 3. The nicest guy in the place asks my mum if she wants to know what he's in for. He told her that he caught his wife cheating, so he just went and sat in his recliner to calm down. She came out and wouldn't stop apologizing after he told her to leave him alone, so he literally cut her face off. During a riot, inmates are doubled bunk in solitary confinement for a weekend. A young kid, presumably a snitch, was locked in with a significantly larger and older gangbanger notorious for the unspeakable act. The kid spent some time in hospital. You don't need details. Mum came upon a man who was stabbed in the skull right before his release. 6-inch shank sticking out of the top of his head. He kept calling out for his daughter. He didn't make it. Job screwed my mum up to the point where she started smuggling substances into the prison, and we no longer have a relationship. Don't go to prison, folks. I'm a Canadian, however I got caught up in the US federal prison system, USP Atlanta. This place, my friends, is as nasty as it gets. A new fish came in, and after doing his obligatory time in the SHU, he got moved into my unit. When he arrived, he was asked if he had any contraband with him by some of the other brothers. He made a vital mistake by telling them no, but later opening up to his cellie that he had some green herb. In prison, it doesn't take long for the block to know what's going on, and so that next morning when this guy went to the shower, he was jumped by a half dozen or so guys. They proceeded to fill up shampoo bottles with warm water and soap, then stuck them halfway up his butt in order to get the green herb out. Although this definitely would have cleaned him out, it didn't force the green herb out. One of the brothers then put on a rubber glove and went straight into the guy's butthole in order to get it out. Once they got what they were after, they proceeded to knock the guy out and hang him up to send the message. It was pretty messed up, and there was nothing anybody could do. He learned the hard way. I was in a cell for a week in a Denver city jail. My cellmate was in for the week waiting on a pickup to take him over to the ICE holding. He was older, and since he was being held and transferred over an immigration issue, he was deemed low risk. It turns out he was a famous Ethiopian torturer who had killed and maimed hundreds of prisoners. He was part of the Red Terror and was not a good guy. Being in 23-hour lockdown with this guy in a cell the size of a walk-in closet was interesting to say the least. So I've never been incarcerated, however I used to work for our local jails as a medical officer. Still to this day, I'm traumatized by abscesses the size of golf balls, leaking smelly green pus, and a girl we like to refer to as Pharmacy Snatch. Pharmacy Snitch was found taking pills in the book holding cells and somehow smuggled these pills into Gen Pop. She entered my clinic with her hands in her uniform, and I kept hearing a rustling sound of some sort. I promptly called the acting captain in to investigate, and had to witness the good old squat and cough. As Pharmacy Snatch did as she was told, a rubber glove containing 20 pills, a Bic pipe, foils, and a lighter fell out. She had some more pills in her uniform shirt and shoe as well, which is where I heard the noise. She tried to throw it behind my desk. I didn't actually go to prison, but I spent a year in Los Angeles County Jail, which is the most infamous for being the suckiest system in the US. It does suck. It sucks terribly. 1. It was my first week and I was sitting on my bunk when I suddenly hear what sounds like a rabbit dying a gruesome death. Turns out a guy got caught stealing and was getting stomped out. The thief was getting his head stomped on by 3 other guys, over which I found out later was a stolen ramen packet. What went through my mind was, these people are going to put this poor guy into a wheelchair over $1. Not a pretty sight for a first-timer, but what I remember most was the screaming. I reiterate that it sounded just like a rabbit getting mauled. Poor guy left on a stretcher. 2. I heard this from an OG who's been in and out of the system. Apparently upstate, in prison, there's a guy from Grape Street Crip who went by the name Purple Passion. Supposedly, Purple Passion was 6'3", 250 plus pounds, and who once he found someone he liked would KO the unfortunate victim and reap the spoils. If he likes it, he'll leave an unwrapped and bitten Snickers bar. If not, then a wrapped Snickers bar. Now, what went through my mind was how could someone be so cruel yet so considerate as to plant a Snickers afterwards? Also heard of others, if not the same person, going by a different name, Snickers Bandit, and El Hoto Magnifico Caliente. 3. You can hear a popping sound, closest I can describe, when someone is stabbed. 4. The Asians, or others, used to have their own exclusive dorm, but that was revoked in the early 2000s when an inmate was killed. I can't remember whether it was over a gambling dispute or because he'd done stuff to kids. Supposedly, there was an attempt to conceal the killing by snapping the bones of the deceased and dismembering the limbs with crude instruments. They then stuffed what parts they couldn't flush down the toilet into the laundry cart. 5. Inmates are housed in either dorms, 60-foot by 90-foot rooms that hold 64 to 96 people, or in cells. I was housed in the former. So we're kept in these concrete boxes, and when a riot pops off due to interracial disputes, there's no place to escape when they start sending in tear gas grenades. If you ever found yourself in one, smear baby oil or Vaseline on your face and wrap a wet towel or t-shirt around. 6. Offenses involving children are frowned upon, even if consensual. There was this one guy, first-timer like myself, who'd apparently given substances to a 15-year-old girl, and they did it. We're sitting in the day room, and he's telling us this like it's something to brag about, and assuredly it got everyone's attention. There were 2 other guys he shared his cell with, both having come down from prison for an added charge. After retiring to our cells, we hear a yell and a scuffle. Turns out the man in question was getting his own comeuppance in non-consensual relations. The entire cell block was cheering this on. The raucous eventually recedes and then silence. Slowly, the smell of feces just permeates throughout the block. The guy had the unspeakable act committed against him, and from what I heard, he stayed under his bunk until the next shower day when he rushed out of his cell begging the guards for help. The food was inhumane. No identifiable meat, plus everything had to be able to be eaten with a spoon because they weren't about to hand out forks and knives. Fun few days. Yep, a family member of mine was in jail for a couple of years for carrying green herb. Don't ask, he was in there way too long and the whole situation was super messed up. He said one of the worst things was the food. They had to eat some mushy bologna stuff that made him gag when he even talks about it. He said they saw a starving cat outside once and they put the bologna out for it to eat. The cat smelled it, shook its head in obvious disgust, and ran away. Holy crap, I thought they were about to eat the cat. I was sent to a woman's prison for about 5 years, and there was a girl in there who was famous for getting high on crystal while babysitting an 8-year-old and then killed the kid. Another one that I found disturbing was a girl who threw her newborn into the trash after she went into labor at home. I mean, you hear about this kind of stuff all the time and it's messed up, but then to be surrounded by people who've actually done it is freaking nuts. Also, it was heartbreaking to see mothers getting visits from their young children. Always tears from both parties because mummy still can't come home. A lot of these women were actually good people who just made stupid mistakes. What's the most embarrassing thing a parent has done to you? For those who didn't grow up in a time where you shared a phone with multiple extensions with your parents, consider yourselves lucky. For those who did, me. Hi, it's Kerry. I was wondering if you were going to the mall tomorrow. Girl I liked.
Yeah, I think so. It's Saturday, so I usually go with my friends.
Me. Well, if you're there, do you want to, meet up somewhere and have lunch? Girl.
Yeah, that sounds good. Where do you want to go?
Well, I was thinking... There's a click, some numbers dialing. Mum.
Hello?
Me, yelling upstairs.
Mom, I'm on the phone!
Mum, through the phone.
Carrie, are you on the phone? I was calling my friend Reva. She's having some people over tomorrow, and I wanted to know if she wanted any potato salad. Me, yelling upstairs, Mom, I'm on the phone with Susie. Get off. Mom, if you want, I can make a little extra so you can take it to judo. I know how you get tired after class. Oh, I hope I get to go this week. You look so handsome in your judo outfit. Click. Me. Sorry, Mom can be so embarrassing. Mom, I don't think she's there anymore, honey. My dad was worse. I distinctly remember having a conversation with my best friends over the phone about a boy I liked, and my dad just chimed in with, "Oh, who's Jackson?" because he'd been listening on the other line the whole time. Had my first boyfriend in middle school and brought him home one time. At one point, my mum made him bring me my clean laundry. And by that, I mean a single pair of pink High School Musical underwear. I cried from embarrassment, but he was actually pretty cool about it and comforted me. Then, he cheated on me. My dad, influenced partly by Bad Boys 2, decided to mess with my boyfriend on my first date by acting like a real hard man. He filled a whiskey bottle with tea, then when he answered the door, he chugged the whole thing while staring my boyfriend down, then tried to break the bottle over his own head. The date was cancelled due to the hospital trip, and I became known as the girl with the bat crap insane father. "Don't concuss yourself this time" became the running joke once I was able to get a date again. That's incredible, and I want to know whether the father knew the risk involved or was just actually stupid enough to try and emulate something he'd seen on TV. I want to know what the hospital people said. I know when my partner had an oral allergic reaction to my rats and his face started swelling up like those pics of dogs that ate bees, the health center staff was highly entertained. My butt was sitting there in the waiting room like, yes, he understands allergies. Yes, he knew he was allergic to them. Yes, he insisted on petting them. Yes, he had an oral allergic reaction to them because he was feeding them tiny pieces of gummy bear by pinching pieces off, then ate the rest of the gummy bear. Yes, I am questioning my assertion that he's very smart. When I was a senior in college, I was working a part-time job. They offered to make my current position full-time once I graduated. Before I got a chance to respond, my father found out and contacted my supervisor expressing concerns about the offer and the fact that I was still in college. How my father found out still boggles my mind, but when my supervisor told me that my dad called him, that was probably the most embarrassing thing either of my parents have ever done. I spoke to my parents a few months after it happened, and the only thing they considered wrong with the situation was that my supervisor told me my dad had called. Another story for your entertainment, when I was in 7th grade and went to a youth conference with my church. All the students got a free t-shirt and people were signing each other's names on them. This one girl signed mine, dotted the I with a heart and left her number. Well, I get home, my mum was doing my laundry and finds said number. Yep, you guessed it, my mother called the number and told the girl I needed to focus on my education and didn't have time for girls. After I submitted a job application to a manager when I was 16, my mother barged up and started going on and on about how I was really shy and not much of a people person. Yeah, that's what a manager wants to hear about an applicant for a customer service job. What the frick was she planning on doing? I don't see how anyone could think that was a good idea at all. When I was 8 years old, I was obsessed with the new Charlie's Angels movies with Cameron Diaz, Lucy Liu, and Drew Barrymore. There's a scene in the movie where Drew is dressed in a patriotic jumpsuit at the NASCAR racetrack, and I really wanted to have that outfit for my Halloween costume. My mum is a costumer, and God bless her, made my costume from scratch to resemble Drew's jumpsuit. Well, as you can imagine, an 8-year-old girl does not have the cleavage to fill that jumpsuit out, so my mother decided to add a massive fake chest to this costume. I was mortified, and for some reason she could not take them out. So for Halloween that year, I had my arms crossed all of trick-or-treating. I still look back at the pictures from that year with deep anxiety. She Googles my boss's number, called him in his office, and asked him to put me on the phone. In his office. I was in a meeting with a client. I didn't answer her call on my cell phone in the middle of a workday. She wanted to gripe about my stepfather and wanted to talk now. No emergency or anything, she just wanted to talk and gave zero craps about the consequences of her actions, as per fricking usual. And that's the day my boss and pretty much the entire company lost respect for me, when the mum of their co-worker called him on his boss's office to talk about personal crap. A few months later, I resigned. There was nowhere to go in that place anymore. My mom did this to me when I was 18. She turned up at my job on my day off and talked to my boss about all her personal problems while being really clingy and trying to win his approval and start dating. I was on probation and the manager had no time for that crap, so I got a call to not come back. I had no idea that it had happened at the time, and it wasn't until a few weeks into looking for work that she decided to tell me about it. She had always done embarrassing crap like that my whole life, but that's when I realized she would mess up my chances at my livelihood and a decent career. So I never let her find out where I worked ever again. Not the name or anything that could be used to track it down. I wouldn't even tell my relatives specifics if I thought they might let it slip to her. I also didn't live with her, so she couldn't read my mail or pay stubs either. Is anyone else getting baffled at apparently how common it is for mums to completely ruin their children's ability to obtain and keep jobs? I can't believe that any of these people lacked the social intelligence to work out that it could only go negatively. Maybe not the most embarrassing, but certainly top 10. My mum went through this phase where she would talk during movies, specifically about what's going on in the movie. She was also terrible at paying attention to what was going on, so oftentimes what she was explaining was incorrect. In addition, she would try to talk over the movie. Mum would occasionally have to yell to make sure she was heard over the action scenes. Imagine, if you will, watching the aftermath of the stampede scene from The Lion King and the person next to you yelling, "Simba is sad because her dad died." My late mom got worse and worse about this as she got older, chatting through church services, movies, TV shows, using a loud voice in the otherwise quiet environments like public transportation, etc. Like, did part of that etiquette fall out of your brain at some point? You taught 2 kids how to act right and now you're off the hook? My sister's college graduation, my dad, my now husband, and I all ignored her, so she proceeded to talk everyone around us through the entire ceremony. Not horrible compared to a lot of these, but ugh. Unfortunately, this isn't a fun story. When I was 16, I had a big birthday party at our house. It was wonderful. I got to invite close to 30 friends, including new people from school. My dad made sure to have my favorite chocolate mousse cake as dessert. It turned into just a bunch of teenagers having a great time and talking. Then my mum was suddenly drunk. We never even noticed her drinking. She began microwaving slices of cheese on a paper plate and eating it with her fingers. Most of the kids didn't notice except for my BFF who had some prior knowledge of her addiction. Kids began leaving, but not before my mum then began asking one of my friends who was 15 about her intimate life and whether she was doing one of the other boys at the party. I thought I would die while standing and watching it happen. I had a male friend come over after school and my best friend/neighbor was going to join soon after. They were dating at the time. Anyway, we get off the bus, started walking down the alleyway, and noticed my mum pulling out of the driveway. So we walked up to the car and I asked where she's going. "Mum, we're heading to the grocery store. Do you need anything?" Me? No, I think I'm good, Mum." "Okay, well I noticed the cucumber in your room was looking a bit soft, so I'll grab you another one." My friend looked like he was actually about to pee himself. Was there an actual cucumber, or was she just messing with you? Oh, she was definitely just fricking with me, but she did come home with a cucumber. I'm 21, and my mum still tries to order my steak for me. I ask for medium rare, and she says, "No, he'll have medium." And I say, "No, medium rare." And she goes, "Okay, whatever, that's fine." My 350-pound mother streaked in front of my boyfriend and my friends for $100. I was only 16 and that image still haunts me. My butthole of a stepdad thought it'd be funny to give my alcoholic mother money to mortify me. When I was 10 or so, I was struggling with being too big for kids' clothes and too skinny for most juniors' clothes. I was trying on this dress with a mesh area around the neck in the department store dressing room, and it was so big on me that my bosom literally showed through the mesh part that was supposed to be around my collarbones. Kids that age are moody, so I just lost it in frustration and started crying. My mum was like, "Oh, just let me see." But I didn't want her to see because that meant showing the whole fitting area, my whole chest. Finally, I showed her, and when she saw how upset I was, instead of comforting me, she decided to mimic me, fake crying in my voice and saying, "Oh my god, everyone can see my chest," and flashed everyone in the dressing room. Jeepers creepers, I came here for dad jokes and funny cringe moments, not actual childhood traumas. This kind of stuff will mess you up for a long time. Well, since we're committed now, here's another one. Sorry, this is a long one, but this will always stick with me until the day I die. So I really liked this one girl in high school, and I was always hoping we would talk someday, but I was a shy and quiet person. So one day we were all waiting around in the hall and she started going off about her ex-boyfriend and stuff, and I was just there listening and watching. She looks at me and randomly says, "Hey, will you be my boyfriend?" My butt clenched so tight, but I was able to smoothly say, "Sure, why not?" And she just laughed and said okay. So later in the day, I somehow gained the courage to ask her for a number since I'm her new BF, and she smiled and said she wasn't being serious, but would actually like to talk to me. She says she's been wanting to, but I just never asked.
Holy crap, my mind was going absolutely insane around this time, so I took her number and walked away without saying anything, because I'm me and will say some stupid crap to screw this up. Fast forward to that night, I'm at home and was going to grab the telephone to give her a call, and my mum asked what I'm doing. I let her know I was calling a friend to talk for a few minutes, but she just said no. Didn't give me a reason, just said no and took the phone back. Now, my mum was going through bad menopause at the time, so she was really mean, unstable, and emotional person for most of my teenage years. Anyway, I asked her about it and she said, I'm not allowed to talk on the phone, but I wasn't in trouble, just wasn't allowed on it. So I did what any teenager does and waited until she fell asleep to go get the phone. So I give her a call and she says she's happy to hear from me and that we can finally talk without our friends bothering us. We talk about the teachers, friends, our schedules, and her general life, etc. I'm really just agreeing and laughing at this point because I'm in utter shock that I'm actually speaking with her. Well, I'm guessing my voice or laughter carried over to my mum's room, and she bursts through the door so hard that I jump and drop the phone. Loud as any person can be. Why the frick are you on the phone? I told your stupid butt you can't use the phone! Why are you on the fricking phone? I was not expecting that outburst at all, so I just said I was talking to a friend and asking them for help with homework. She says, I don't give a crap. I told you not to be on the phone and now you're talking with your friends? Who the frick are you talking to so gosh damn late? For some dumb reason, I gave her the girl's name and not like another male friend's. She was pretty much turning red at this point. You don't listen to me and now you're on the phone with some B-word? I don't want no B-word calling our house. Hang up right now and tell that B-word don't ever call here again. She slams the door shut, and I look down to see that the phone is still connected. My heart dropped. She had heard the whole fricking thing. So I pick up the phone and sheepishly say, hello? She only said, wow, that was, okay, see you later, and hung up. The next morning she avoided me like the plague. She never talked to me again after that, and we never spoke on the phone again. A part of my soul died that night, and I don't think it will ever be fully restored. Mine bought me a diary encouraging me to write in it. Later stole said diary, broke the lock off, forged a bunch of made-up crushes in there, and then read it aloud at the dinner table to humiliate me. My mother was not very kind. My parents, Southeast Asian, told one of my best friends, who's a girl and Caucasian, behind my back that if she was the same ethnicity as them, they would ask me to marry her. I'm sure they thought this would be very flattering. I found out later, and to this day, over a decade later, it still makes me cringe big time. A lot of people here are asking me if my parents are racist. They're not. This is a cultural thing. I've been married to my Caucasian wife for many years, and they love her. It was my 16th birthday, and my family went to a fancy Italian restaurant. The staff came over to sing happy birthday to me, and my dad started singing along loudly in a bad Italian opera kind of accent. We're not Italian. The staff was so stunned, and they just stopped singing. The other customers around us laughed and applauded, and the staff just walked away. I was mortified. When I was young, we had a pajama day at school, but I always just wore my boxers to sleep. Well, obviously, a kid can't show up to school in just underwear, but I was a little too dumb to understand that. Why my mum allowed me to go and even drove me there, I have no idea. It was the most embarrassing day of my life, and the school had to call my mum to come pick me up halfway through the day. I was in elementary school, but I can't remember if it was first or second grade. And the school didn't notice or care until halfway because I was eating lunch in the cafeteria and kids were staring at me. Some adult must have noticed them. I wore C-cup bras when I was 11 years old. My mum loved to loudly talk about them to anyone who would listen. Yeah, she's only 11. You wouldn't think it from the way she's filled out up top. Then I'd start crying from the humiliation and she'd tell me to lighten up. Seriously, half of these deserve a place in a video I did the other week. What's something harmless your parents did to you as a kid that really screwed you up as an adult? Some of these are equally as traumatizing. Telling everybody at Thanksgiving dinner at her boyfriend's house about my tween bout with anorexia. I didn't want to be there in the first place, and she just kept going on and on about how I had carrots for dinner for a year until I had to shout at her to stop. To her credit, she was immediately embarrassed when she realized what she was doing, and she apologized profusely. I was 13 and waiting for a ride with my sister and parents at Dollywood. Across the way, two very pretty girls about my age were smiling at me. I smiled back and acted all cool because I was a skater boy with skater hair, and my Vision streetwear and some shirt with a skull on it or something. It was working too. The girls whispered to each other and giggled, and one even waved at me. Then my mum reached her damn hand to my face and popped a pimple right there in public. The girls were aghast, I was humiliated, and I have never forgiven her.
Oh, I have a Dollywood story too. We were with a church group and my parents were along with us because they wanted to extend our family vacation in the area. My dad was walking around with us and I'd wanted to ride a ride. I couldn't find him after the ride, so I headed up to the front of the organized meeting place like we'd been told. My parents and most of the church group were there. My mom starts yelling at me for running off and spanks me in front of everyone. I was 13. When I was 5 or so, my preschool did a play based on Noah's Ark. It was a pre-K attached to a church. We were instructed that our costumes were supposed to be raincoats, rain boots, or umbrellas. I didn't have any of those things but begged my dad to get me at least one of them so I'd fit in and follow the guidelines. Fast forward, the night of the play, I'm frantically scanning the audience because my dad is always late. He finally shows up and brings me a life jacket. I had to stand up there with all the kids in their little raincoats in a life jacket. I was really embarrassed. Dad's defense was that I was the only kid who would have survived the flood. I can laugh now, but I sure wasn't laughing then. My father was a huge racist and used pejorative terms to describe other people. I knew about the words for African Americans, Chinese people, and Japanese people, so I never said them. Little me didn't know about the other words. I used one in class to answer a question my history teacher asked, and he was properly horrified. I was immediately removed from class and my confused butt was grilled for hours about my word usage. I finally said I didn't know what I did wrong. My dad says it all the time to describe people from that country. They called my mum and I had to go home. There was a shouting match between my parents and my dad's mother that night and I was beaten soundly by my father. Mum made me call my 8th grade social studies teacher at home to ask if I could use him as a job reference. He lived with his parents still, and I asked for him by first name. He waited for me at my locker the next day to tell me to never phone his house again, parents' house, and never call him by his first name again. Didn't get the job either. Mum denies this ever happened and claims she would never demand I do something so strange. Don't you hate it when your parents become revisionist historians? I came home from school with head lice. Instead of telling the teacher, who would send a letter home to everyone without it specifically naming which child they noticed had lice, my mother rang every person in my class that she had the phone number of. She would have a chat with the parent, all, "Yeah, she has head lice, so you need to check your kid." I probably got it from someone in my class, and the whole class likely already had lice, but kids don't realize that, so the whole class were calling me dirty and saying that I'd infected them. It was horrible. I was hysterically crying while she called people. I didn't expect so many people to read this, so to address the concerns, she never did anything bad ever in my life except this, and she kept saying, "Don't be stupid, I'm just telling their mothers so they can sort it," and presumably didn't expect them to tell their 7 or 8-year-olds who it was. Clearly someone did, because the whole class knew it was just me by the next day. Seems there's a lot of comments below with similar stories of adults having no clue how oddly shameful it is to have lice when you're little, which sucks, but kids will jump on anything to be mean sometimes. I have aggressive Crohn's that started showing up around 8th grade. My mum took me to all of my doctor appointments, which were all pretty embarrassing because no teenage boy wants their mum involved in their butt-related illness. One particular visit, we were about halfway through the appointment when she whipped out a Cool Whip tub. Turns out the following night I used the bathroom and it didn't all go down, so she thought it would be helpful to load up that in our poor people Tupperware and haul it into the doctor so he could look over it. He had the confused, "What am I supposed to do with poop in a Cool Whip tub?" face for a good 5 to 10 seconds, then politely dismissed it. Who would have thought there isn't any medical knowledge to be gained from fishing poop out of the toilet, refrigerating it overnight, and schlepping it up for an office visit? When I was a senior in high school, I had left the lights on in my truck all day and had to call my dad to come and jumpstart my car. Now, my father is 6'1" and has a very large belly. Mother Fricker rolls up in cloth shorts and no shirt to jumpstart my car. Then there was a time a few years earlier that my mother had him sent up to school to give me a sandwich before a football game. The man's boxers were longer than his shorts. "He's always there for you when you frick up though, isn't he? He'd give you the shirt off his back if he was wearing one." This is actually something people have said about him. People who quit their jobs on the first day, what was your "I'm out of here" moment? I used to work at a craft store as a cashier, but quit when I moved. Ended up going back a couple of years later to make some extra cash, but this time in the framing department. During the interview, they swore up and down I would only ever be a backup cashier because I refused to have a full cashier shift. First shift after the interview is listed as framing, but I'm put on cash and told that actually most of my shifts would be cash since they'd found someone else for framing. I spent the next 6 hours giving everyone who came to my register 20% off everything and then never went back. Not technically first day, but second day.
When I was 20 or so, I got hired to be a temporary floor member for Forever 21 during the holiday season. My training started a week before Black Friday, so the store was already kind of in chaos. On my first day of training, I walked in and the floor manager gave all the new hires a tour, showing us the facility and layout of the store. After this, I was assigned to a veteran floor member to shadow and get an idea of what my job was and what my duties would be. As soon as I was assigned, the manager dipped, never to be seen again. An hour and a half into my shift, my shadow E got an emergency family call and had to take off for a week. When this happened, I found some other floor manager and explained the situation and asked them who else I would shadow. The manager's response was, "Just do what you can by yourself, you'll be fine, everyone else is busy. Figured we'll be okay, so I'll try." I don't know if any of you have shopped in the women's section of Forever 21, but during seasonal sales they'll have multiple articles of clothing that all look exactly the same, with slight differences. Example, a white cardigan with 4 buttons that looked literally the same as a white cardigan with 5 buttons. The best part was these different items were often placed in completely separate parts of the store, and it was the job of the dressing room to return the unpurchased items to the correct section so the employees could put them back on the shelves. Well, these employees fricking sucked, and I didn't know if they were part of my section or not, so I'd spend a ridiculous amount of time trying to find where they'd go before realizing, wait, this isn't even my section. I've checked literally every rack. So I'd put it back on the sorting rack and moved to the next item. More than 50% of the stuff I was told to reshelf wasn't my section. I just did as best as I could and got ready for my next miserable day. The next day I come in and the store manager pulls me to her office and told me how slow I was the day before, and if I want to keep working there, I need to be very fast. I explained my lack of training and unfamiliarity with the store, and she told me if I didn't know where the clothes were in sections, I should come in on my free time and memorize where stuff was at. I spent the rest of my shift putting clothes in random freaking places, then never came in for a third shift. Frick that place and frick their management. Nothing as satisfying as hearing a person do what we've all wanted to do at times, flipping off the manager for their unreasonable bullcrap, and leaving. My first internship was at a Brazilian teen detention center. It's akin to a prison, but Brazilian law has some distinctions between crimes committed while as an adult or a teenager. Teens go through socio-educational measures. I was walking through a courtyard with my supervisor when some doctors came running, flailing their arms and screaming while officers came running from the opposite direction. I get pulled by my supervisor who just tells me to run back to our office. These teens, as young as 12, had escaped their block. A few minutes later, an officer comes knocking on doors and the officers and yelling for everyone to run outside because a fire had broken out. Some of the teens had set mattresses on fire in their cells. I didn't really nope out, my teacher did. She hadn't even been there that day, so I was forced by the university to choose another place to intern at. Oh well. I was 17 and working precast concrete. Refused to use a rusted-to-crap ladder. Supervisor called me a wuss, got up 7 rungs before his foot went through a rung, heard his foot snap as he fell. I called an ambulance and walked to my car in the parking lot. Wasn't exactly the first day, but I didn't show up after the second shift. It was rather a popular cafe chain in my country. I was hired to work in the kitchen as a cook along with another senior cook. Let's put aside the fact that I had zero cooking knowledge whatsoever. The senior cook was leaving the kitchen every 5 minutes to smoke. I was just there alone, in the kitchen. Orders are printing fast and I'm standing there not sure what to do first. And the waitress comes over yelling at me to cook stuff I don't have any business cooking, definitely not on my own. Later on, the senior cook told me they had at least 2 rats running around the kitchen. Showed me they pooped on a plate. I never came back and I'm glad the place got shut down. On the first day of working at Amazon warehouses, the managers broke down to everyone how a 15-minute break works there. Walking to the bathroom is 2.5 minutes, 10 minutes of actual break, and then 2.5 minutes to go back to your stations. It took me 2.5 minutes to walk to my car, and I took a forever break. Summer job working for a landscape architect. Got to the job site and he asked me to dig a hole in some rocky dirt. I asked for a shovel. He didn't have one. I asked for a hand spade. He didn't have one either. He told me to just dig a hole with my bare hands and then drove off to another site, leaving me completely alone. I dug for a little bit and then said, "Frick this," and left. Had the job specified that I needed to supply my own tools, I could have, but it didn't and I wasn't going to work for someone that expected folk to dig through hard, rocky soil with their hands.
Huh, sounds like he sucks at communicating. Those bosses are the worst.
I'd say he's got bigger fish to fry than communication. Guy runs a hole-digging business with no shovels. I noped out of an interview one time, thanked them at the end and said it wasn't for me. Those interviewing, management-level folks, started arguing with each other in front of me during the interview. I figured if this is the vibe at the management level, then I sure as heck don't want to be your employee. Answered an ad in the paper, this was in the mid-90s, for what seemed to be an office job making sales calls when I was in college. Did a phone interview and was called back for an in-person interview. When I go to the interview, I'm led into a room with about 50 other people and a small stage at the front of the room. We're all somewhat confused as to what's going on. Finally, a guy gets on the stage and informs us that we've been selected for the opportunity to sell Cutco. Me and 2/3 of the rest stood up and walked out. Anytime I see more than a dozen people for a job interview, I just nope the frick right out. If it's not door-to-door sales paid only on commission, it's some multi-level marketing crap. I wish some job interviews would be more forthcoming about that. Some places have outright lied to me. Legitimate response. I think that last person's rule about the number of applicants is a fairly good one to go by. I just wish I'd walked away from my first bullcrap door-to-door job. I was a cashier at Lowe's during college for less than a full day. I made it through the multiple-day training, but there was so much stupid crap going on, I almost thought I was on a hidden camera show. All the employees complained about how hard they had to work while simultaneously not getting enough hours. Nobody understood why they were hiring like 4 new people. I was one of those 4. Turns out it's because they were progressing through an indecent conduct complaint that required restructuring of the store and firing some of the employees. This was known to HR and explained to new hires, against company policy, but it wasn't known to the employees. Apparently some of whom still worked there, including the fricking person doing the training. She was really inappropriate and said not to worry about the indecent conduct stuff and that everything would go back to normal soon enough and that we wouldn't have to be so uptight. They fired her the day before I started, along with one of the cashiers who trained me. She also offered me terrible guidance for the application process. They were looking for a part-time help, and 2 of the 3 days they needed help on, I had off from school. I told them I couldn't work nights most nights, but if they needed daytime help, it had to be on one of those days. She said if I was too restrictive, they wouldn't keep me on, and lied to my boss about my availability to make me even more attractive than I already was. Wink! And told me to schmooze them a bit and I'd make it further. She said in the end it wouldn't impact anything and I'd get those days. My first week's schedule, I was working mornings every day that I was in school and I wasn't given any hours on my days off. Aside from the fact that I was given 2 times the hours the position called for, when other employees were shorted, my work schedule was literally impossible to consolidate with my school schedule. I only went to work on my first day to tell them that I was quitting and that their application process was a fricking mess. They couldn't figure out how so much went wrong, and then they asked who trained me and everything made sense. They thanked me for at least showing up to quit, unlike the other 3 they hired, who had just stopped returning their calls and no-showed on their first days. A long time ago, not long after getting my papers as a chef, I had an interview at a hotel for a position in the kitchen. The executive chef and I chatted in his office for about 20 minutes. At the time, I remember him coming off as very arrogant, which is quite common in this field. I didn't think much of it at the time as the pay was decent and the shift was what I wanted. As I was leaving his office, I turned to leave through the dining room, the way I'd come, which was closed at the time. It was another hour or so before service started, and he says to me, no, not that way. Go through the kitchen. You're not good enough to go through the dining room. I was so surprised by what he said. I just did what he asked without a word. Later on, after I'd got home, I phoned him up and said that after having a close look, I decided that his menu wasn't good enough and that I wouldn't be accepting his offer. Restaurant. Swept under my station when we were closing. Giant brown pile came out with the broom from under the lowboy fridge. The pile then began to scatter. It was hundreds of roaches. Never returned. My first ever job. I was 13 and would be delivering phone books from the back of a van through people's letterboxes. So I'd be in the back of the van with the phone books and there was an older guy slowly driving while I went back and forth to the van/houses with the books. At one point the van was getting empty so there was more space to move around and we'd finished the delivery in the streets that we were paid to deliver in, and he drove to another. While driving there, he drove, let's say aggressively, and I fell inside the back where the books were. I wasn't sitting in a seat as the van had no seats in the back. As I put my hand out to steady myself, I accidentally laid it across a portable radio that had its antenna extended, but the antenna was also broken halfway and razor sharp. I sliced the palm of my hand clean open 3 to 4 inches. I can only describe what I saw as gruesome. I said to pull the van over and I needed help. He saw my hand and just threw me a plastic bag, the kind you'd get at a supermarket, and told me to wrap my hand in it. Then continued with the deliveries. At least he delivered the remaining books by himself. I should have been taken to a hospital or at least home to my parents, and I quit after that and never showed up again. As you can imagine, my parents were quite angry at him. Well, as awful as my first after-school delivery job was, it wasn't that bad, and you have my sympathy. At least when I got injured, they would just schedule a later delivery for me. I got hired at a very small knockoff dollar store in an old, failing mall. The owner was foreign with a very thick accent. He told me I'd get $6 an hour, but neglected to mention it was under the table. I spent about an hour stocking the very overly cluttered shelves before I was told to get more chips out of the back storage area. I walk back there and there's about a dozen men sitting on boxes all crammed into a small back room. I asked where the chips were and these guys all glared at me. They started speaking in another language and rapidly motioned towards me. Then one guy got up and asked what I needed. I told him I was supposed to get a box of chips and he got a box out of the pile and handed it to me. The entire time these guys are all staring at me. Everything back there looked shady as all hell and it was very uncomfortable. A while later I had to use the restroom, which was also in the back. These guys all just wordlessly glared at me while I went into the woman's restroom. While I was in the restroom, someone tried to open the door. I was the only woman there. The owner told me he wanted me to come back that night late in the evening well after the mall closed. I didn't show up. I came in the next morning and lied about why I couldn't work there. He still gave me the few bucks from what little time I did work. I don't know what in the heck that guy had going on there, and I didn't want to find out. Restaurant line chef. Worked a 12-hour shift and was given 2 breaks of about 10 to 15 minutes each. Burned my hand numerous times because they gave me plates that came right from the oven, and never said a word. End of the shift, I told the head chef I was done. He called me soft and said I was the 3rd person to quit on him after a day. I said, maybe it's the way you treat people. Funny how people think it's not their problem when many people quit working with them. Restaurant owners never seem to get this. I was a hostess at a restaurant like this for about a year. We could never hold on to the kitchen staff because they were worked to the bone and barely paid. It affected the whole restaurant. Dishwashers were either swamped or had nothing to do because the tickets were too backed up. Busboys were the same. The servers got crap tips because the food was so slow and the managers were constantly comping food and getting chewed out about long waiting times. And even the hosts had long waits and sections full of empty tables we couldn't sit because we were trying to let the kitchen catch up. Then the idiot owner would come in, sit everyone on my list, and go yell at the kitchen for being slow. We were lucky if new guys lasted a week back then. Restaurant work is a joke. I've been in New York City restaurants on and off for about 10 years. They all turn to crap or just start as bullcrap right from the get-go. My last job was as a sous chef. I'll never work the line again. 2 times. Once I applied for and got a telemarketing job. I didn't know what it entailed. After an hour, I knew it was a terrible fit. Auto-dialing people during their dinners, trying to sell them stuff they didn't want, and reading a horrible script while sitting in a soulless grey cubicle. I got up, went to the manager, apologized, and said it wasn't a good fit for me. He seemed understanding. Another time, I attended a Make Easy Money at This Job seminar, and turns out it was selling knives door to door. I don't know if I technically quit or just noped out at the end of it. I answered an ad for a babysitting job. I was already working on a casual basis, but it was sporadic, so I thought some after-hours babysitting would be welcome extra cash. The couple were both in the military and proceeded to tell me that I would be staying in the spare room and looking after their 6-month-old child around the clock, as well as doing the housework. I would have 1 day off every 2 weeks. They said it's cash in hand, so I could sign on to the dole, unemployment benefit, to make up the rest of the money. I left on the spot. They wanted a live-in housemaid and a nanny, not a babysitter, and they were not able to pay for one. Why they thought it was basically up to me to illegally collect the dole and subsidize them, I don't know. Applied for a job at my longtime favorite restaurant, celebrated my birthday there every year. Owner asks me to come in for basically a tryout, as I communicated I was looking at other job possibilities as well. I come in and they just stick me on dishwasher for an hour. No biggie. Then the dishwasher doesn't show up, so the kitchen manager asks me to stay on their lunch rush. Says I'll get paid for the hours. I do. Kitchen staff was nice, so I was happy to help out, even though I figured I'd be taking a different job. I fill out a time card at the end of the shift and tell the manager I probably wouldn't be back. He understands and thanks me for the help. Fast forward a couple of weeks and he tells me to email the owner after I ask him if I should pick up my measly paycheck. I do, and she basically tells me to frick off over text. Tells me it was staging, and that she had told me I wouldn't be paid. I respond that I understand, but that I stayed for an extra 3 hours which I was told I'd be paid for. She stops responding, and I decide I want to be petty over the $40, so I get the state labor department involved. Dude goes in there and makes her pay me for the hours, including the first staging hour. Couple weeks later, I got my $40, never went back to that restaurant. In hindsight, I'm very glad I did this, and sharing the story with others in my city, I learned this practice was very common with local restaurants. Hopefully, others learn to stand up for their labor too from my small experience. Secondly, this restaurant closed down a couple of weeks after I got that paycheck. The owner made a long-winded complaint on the Facebook page about how the food culture had changed in the city and her restaurant didn't fit in anymore. Total bullcrap, they were always popular. Most people theorize the terrible mismanagement and employee abuse caught up to her. It's interesting. This story is from about 5 years ago, and I stopped my long restaurant career about 7 years ago. I wonder if there's been any significant transformation in restaurant culture, or if it's still the same exploitative crap, different date. Maybe you modern waiters and chefs can let me know in the comments. More hospo stories to follow. I was a waitress, the only waitress at a just-opened diner. The boss didn't have me sign any paperwork, everything was under the table. But that wasn't what made me quit at the end of the night. In order to get me where he wanted me to go, he would pinch my skirt at the upper thigh, not quite the butt, but very close, and pull me around like it was a leash. Needed me in the kitchen? Rather than call me, he would come out, pinch my skirt, and pull me to the kitchen. Needed me at the cash machine? Again, come over to wherever I was. Didn't matter if I was serving a customer, and he would grab my skirt to pull me. That act, in itself, made some customers uncomfortable. Mind you, one couple left almost 50% tip at the end, but I think it was more out of pity and embarrassment on my behalf. I was supposed to come in the next day, but I called that night and said the job wasn't for me. I came in a couple of days later to turn in my apron, and he just took a wad of cash out of his pocket and paid me then and there. God, he was creepy. I think it was a smart move to quit. When the microwave in the lunchroom was coin activated. This is like when I made my patrons pay money to use the bathrooms at my roller coaster park when the ticket prices weren't cutting it. Amazing move. Had an orientation for an alarm company. Next day, the manager calls and says don't worry about going into the office and to meet at Planet Hollywood. They like to get to know the employees better over lunch. Next day, I go into the office and another employee who I had not met says, "You must be Steve." I was like, "Huh?" They responded, "Light-skinned, pretty boy," is how the manager described me. In the same conversation, I found out no one else had ever been invited for a get-to-know-you lunch. And I was out. Got what was supposed to be a prestigious political internship that came with a security clearance and everything. Found out at orientation that the part-time internship was really 40 to 60 hours unpaid, and that no intern had gone on to work with the organization and weren't really given a leg up for other federal posts. We were supposed to facilitate meetings with heads of state, coordinate conferences, and assist the actual employees with composing published research papers for which we would not be credited. They were definitely drinking their own Kool-Aid, so I bounced right on out of there. I was hired to be a waitress, which has a lower hourly wage due to tips. The entire shift they had me wash dishes in the sink, but paid me waitress wages. A few months later, the restaurant was investigated for another of fraudulent activities. I interviewed for a professional marketing assistant and got the job straight away. I was under the impression that I would be an assistant to the man I was interviewed by. When I showed up for my first day, the same waiting room I was in the previous day was full of people. I quickly learned that we were all hired and I would be a door-to-door salesperson selling some pretty useless crap. I spent my entire day inside a Starbucks applying for other jobs and went home, got paid, but never came back. I wasn't the person, but I was training a new guy at a movie theater. A customer asked for extra butter. She was nice and normal. Not a mean or rude customer, the kind I would pay to handle all day long. He puts the popcorn tub down, says, "I'm going to the bathroom," takes off his apron and walks out the front door and never came back. Maybe he crapped his pants and couldn't bear the thought of returning. My brother got fired because he crapped his pants on the third day on the floor and had to go home early. They said they fired him because he wasn't upselling enough at the register. But if you get fired on your second day on register for not trying to get people to sign up for credit cards and the day before you crap your pants, you got fired for crapping your pants. If you make 10,000 shoes, you're a shoemaker. If you fly 10,000 hours, you're a pilot. If you crap one pair of pants, you're the pant crapper. How have you observed or used body language to your own advantage? The most amazing occurrence of body language I've witnessed was a friend back in high school that could control our group of friends. Whenever we were standing in a circle and he wanted to speak, he would simply take a step or two towards the middle. This would cause everyone to quiet down, effectively giving him room to speak uninterrupted. We didn't catch on for a while, but the way he was able to perform it so subtly was amazing. I believe this has to do with personal space and how we instinctively react to an incoming presence. Similar simple ways to control a group. If you're eating dinner and everyone is done and just chatting, simply stand up. People usually follow suit almost unconsciously. Alternately, if you're a group or milling around but should be heading somewhere, just start walking. Generally, everyone will follow. Sometimes I have to tag a friend or two to start walking with me if part of the group is not paying attention, but once you get 3 or 4, the rest tend to follow. Anyone not following due to being engrossed in conversation will soon go, "Wait, where did everyone else go?" and chase after you. I do this a lot at crowded sci-fi and gaming conventions when my group needs to be at a panel or meet up. Next up, we have a rather long story about an individual who seems to have mastered this particular subject matter and used it fully to his own advantage. I once sat next to a guy in my college class that was unreal with things like this. For instance, once before class, while we were waiting outside the room for the professor to arrive, he saw a pretty girl coming down the hall. Immediately, he goes, "I'm going to go talk to her," but doesn't move. I'd always known the guy was suave beyond my years, so I'm really curious as to what his icebreaker is going to be and waiting to see this in action. Being a bit unsure of myself in my early college years, this was like Houdini personally giving me a behind-the-scenes look at a magic trick. The girl was very pretty but had sort of a sour look on her face. In my head, I'm like, no pickup line in the world is cracking this iceberg. Then I watched the true master in action. My first mistake was ever assuming he needed an icebreaker in the first place. He didn't simply start a conversation by saying something, or anything. He used his body posture to make her start the conversation with him. As nonchalantly as you could get, he pulls out his cell phone and pretends to look down at it. When she's about 3 feet away from us while still glancing down, he takes a half step in her direction, in her path. In one smooth motion, he looks up, fakes a reaction of, "Oh, I'm sorry, I wasn't paying attention," as he takes a half step back to make room for her and leans back against the wall. Her, apparently totally sold on his genuine surprised look and repositioning to make room for her. "Oh, thank you." Him, "Hey, no worries. Traffic these days." "Huh. Yeah, is that Professor X's cost accounting class?" Yeah, how did you know that? Are you an accounting major?" "Yeah, I'm in IA2 right now." How majors refer to intermediate accounting 2, meaning she was about 1 semester behind us in the course cycle. "Well, you'll do fine if you can handle IA2. It's more difficult than cost accounting is. The trick is to..." "Oh, really?" And the conversational small banter continues. He also told me later he already knew she was an accounting major by recognizing the book she was carrying when he first glanced up from his phone. Don't ask a question you don't already know the answer to in the first conversation, but people like to think they're being informative. This guy was full of these little insights, and how good he was on this bordered on socially manipulative. So yeah, body language is unbelievably powerful for how subtle it is. To answer some of the inquiries I'm getting about this story, I would say he was average looking on the whole, but he certainly knew how to carry himself, and he did dress nice as well. Sitting next to him can also confirm his cologne was on point. So I don't think he had any unnaturally good looks, but good posture, good dress, and a general clean, hygienic appearance will help maximize anybody's potential. And of course, he had that unmistakable aura of natural confidence. You could tell him his car just blew up, and the first thing he'd do was lean to the girl next to him and go, "Hey, I need to go car shopping. Want to come with me?" No, he wasn't even close to being creepy. That's what was so unreal about it. For the first few weeks, that was my thought as well. Nobody's this good without being a serious creep. Or, he does this just to bang chicks. Once again, my mistake. It was never about doing the deed with women. In fact, he never made any kind of comment like that whatsoever. No innuendos, no, "Bro, this chick is so hot." Nothing. He genuinely wanted to meet and get to know this girl to see if they had any chemistry. That simple. And no, he wasn't really a pickup artist. No, he didn't have any hack to the system. There was no good lines. The guy wasn't trying to teach me anything. Although he ended up teaching me quite a bit. This guy just was. I don't think he could teach it even if he really wanted to. What I learned was merely through observation. The beauty of it was how subtle it was, and I wonder if he even knew all of it consciously, or if it was just ingrained subconsciously. For example, when she first said, "Oh, thank you," we were both leaning against the hall wall and she was passing in front of us. Simple enough. By the time the conversation progressed, we were in more of a triangle-type shape, more inclusive. But I never even saw the fricker move. Don't recall anything of us shifting positions whatsoever, but there we were. And only after going over it in my head 1,000 times did I even recognize that it happened, let alone know how it might have made her feel more welcomed. So subtle. But there in the moment, I find it hard to believe that it was part of a calculated endeavor on his part. And I know it wasn't on mine. Like I said, he just was. If I learned one thing from this guy, it would be this. There's a saying in the running world that if you want to be fast, don't try and run fast, try and run easy. And then, when you can run easy, try and run light on your feet. Don't worry, if you can run easy and light on your feet, you will be fast. Same concept applies. If you want to be good at meeting women, don't try and be good at meeting women. Put some effort into yourself. Dress well, shower, exercise. These things matter. Learn to get to know all kinds of people of both genders because you want to get to know them. And do it till it's easy for you. Don't worry, if you can put some effort into yourself and getting to know people is easy, you will meet women. And there we have it, folks, the man who just apparently lives and breathes this stuff. I'm still not entirely sure he was all that, and maybe the writer of the story is just a little bit infatuated with him themselves, but there we go. To me, the absolutely most important thing I've learned about body language is that it had to be taken into context. What else they're doing, what they're talking about, who they're talking to, where they are, etc. When starting to observe, it's easy to take one gesture or posture or expression and go, hey, look, crossed arms. That equals defensiveness. Or whatever, but that's only one part of an equation. If body language is an actual language, then crossed arms is just one word. You can't figure out what someone is saying by just looking at one word. You've got to look at the whole sentence. I often catch myself mirroring the actions of people I'm interested in, so I guess that's something. Agreed, it's a circular paradox. I can never work out if I'm mirroring them or they're mirroring me. Either way, it definitely indicates interest. During a job interview, sit in the same posture as your interviewer is sitting in. It gives the impression that you're feeling the same way that they are. I don't think you're right for this job. My thoughts exactly, sir. Both get up and leave. In a quiet room full of people, for example, a classroom, scream as loud as you can in your mind. Anyone that winces is a mind reader. You should watch out for them. Wow, I'm surprised I'd come this far in the thread to get to the important stuff. I just did it, and someone wouldn't stop staring at me for 5 minutes. Confirmed. Not exactly body language in the traditional sense, but I've sold 6 or 7 houses in my time, and I've always known which viewer would put on an offer by the fact that they 1. Used the bathroom, and 2. Altered something. It's held true every time. I stage my houses very carefully, and I know when anything has been moved, or used, or changed, and would tell my husband to expect a call from the agent that evening. My guess is that the folks are subconsciously taking possession or marking territory. Ah yes, christening the toilet is vital when moving into a new home. Failing that, peeing your initials into the master bedroom carpet is an acceptable substitute. When it comes to non-verbal communication, you don't just like for one particular behavior, you're looking for clusters, and even then, nothing is ever 100% true. Also, you have to take into consideration different cultures have different mores. What's considered acceptable in one culture might not be in another. In a group conversation, people will tend to look at the person they're most comfortable with the most. Self-touching is often a sign a person is nervous or anxious. Lip-biting is often a sign of arousal. Pupil dilation is a sign that a person is excited, and possibly on substances. I think the changes in body language are more significant than anything else. For example, and I've had this pointed out to me, I normally stand with a pretty straight posture, ex-figure skater here. But when I start talking to someone else I think is cute, I quite obviously arch my back and shift my weight entirely onto one hip. This might be a normal posture for someone else, but the shift is what makes it significant. In conclusion, don't trust static body posture. Someone could have just been chilling like that. Watch how their body position changes when you approach. That's possibly a valid hypothesis. I think I definitely shift and shuffle a bit more when I'm anxious or uncomfortable about something or someone, so maybe this post author knows what they're talking about. Speaking from someone who used to be in car sales, some guys look for the wiggle during test drives. That's shifting in the seat while driving to get more comfortable. Probably something to do with taking mental ownership of the vehicle. Hands in pockets or arms crossed equals defensive. Needs more rapport building before pitching. Some people are so intimidated about walking into a dealership that they prefer to walk the lot after business hours at night. That's fine too. We had a computer programmer so overly stimulated that we recognized that and organized a quiet room for him to sit down and discuss his options. He bought the car and thanked us. Some things like handshakes are culturally specific. I always greeted someone with a firm handshake and look in the eye. Clients from India generally give limp shakes because that's more usual if they shake at all. Chinese and Japanese prefer no bodily contact in business. A quick bow or nod usually suffices. For farmers, whoever speaks first loses. There was a guy who regularly came in to look around and all these sales guys tried to pitch him. He eventually bought from the one guy who kept his mouth shut and ignored him. Not sure how that works. Always know who the boss is. Do not assume it's the man or the woman based on who's talking the most, based on heteronorms. Both parties need to be engaged. Very low chance of a deal without the spouse, regardless of what someone says about being able to make a decision. Work and loss prevention. This one, among many, many others, is almost always true. When a person has made the decision to shoplift and is about to conceal, they look like they're peeing in the pool. Every time. LP is all about body language. Or they're like me and they're paranoid that they changed their mind about that thing they were going to buy and put it back, but then picked it up again and now everyone thinks I'm shoplifting, but I swear I'm not. And no, I do not need assistance and I'm a normal average customer, just going about my casual business in your fine establishment. I don't want to go to prison. I won't make it in prison. Shaking someone's hand can make you memorable. This is just something I've observed, so I'm not passing it off as a general truth. When I meet someone new in a casual setting, a friend of a friend, someone's co-worker, someone's family member, etc., a person who acknowledges your existence and makes their way over to shake your hand will have an immediate impact on me over someone who just smiles and nods or waves or whatever. I feel more comfortable with someone who makes the initiative to shake your hand for whatever the reasons may be. I'm much more likely to approach someone whose hand I've shaken to learn more about them at some point in the night. This very much goes in the business world as well. I know it's common knowledge to shake someone's hand when you meet them first time in a business setting, but if someone approaches you to shake your hand while they're leaving, they are far more memorable in my mind. It gives me a sense of belonging, knowing that someone thought about me in particular before leaving a place or setting and had to make their way over to let me know they're leaving. This also works with customer-client relationships. If a customer shakes my hand after a transaction is completed, I'll remember them and may give them some sort of incentives or discounts next time I see them. Americans love a firm handshake, but the same custom is not necessarily true in other countries. It can also be a male thing, with some men using a crushing handshake and holding it for a long time, making it a move of dominance. Lyndon Johnson used to hold the handshake and then grab the lapel of the other man's suit with his other hand, and then stand very close until he got the answer he wanted. Pediatrician here. Girls as young as 9 to 12 will start twirling or playing with their hair if they are attracted to someone. It's pretty adorable to see it develop. This doesn't have to be a romantic attraction, you weirdos. It can happen when they see someone doing something impressive, talking to someone important, etc. This behavior continues but can take on many different patterns, like pushing their hair forward. Some guys take this as a sign that the girl is covering up, but it's probably closer to, "Hey, look at my pretty hair." Take a look at the audience during The Voice or whatever country has got talent, etc. Look at the audience when a slightly cute boy sings decent or better. It's hilarious to watch. It's like a collective sploosh among the girls ranging from 12 to 32. Well, now I can't unread this ever, and now if I ever watch a show with a studio audience, the people I'm watching with are going to wonder why I burst out laughing when a good-looking man walks on stage and there is a camera shot to the audience. When one person grooms another during social interaction, "Oh, you've got some lint on your shoulder, let me just..." She or he is being subconsciously affectionate to that other person and welcoming him or her into the pack. I mean family. Like monkeys picking each other's nits. I had a teacher that was a former cop. He pointed out that a person in a normal state of mind will swing their arms slightly while they move or walk. Angry people have a tendency to hold their arms at their sides and not move them. Always true? Maybe not. Often true? Sure. The same basic rule applies here, and also implies that you're trying to hide something. If your hands sit unmoving in your pocket, you're most likely angry but attempting to keep this hidden. Brooding, if you will. If they're swinging around in there, you're in a normal state of mind or attempting to hide the fact that you're publicly pleasuring yourself. But what if you just want to put your hands in there because you don't like flailing them around? Clearly, any attempt at comfort and ease is a sign of being angry. There's too many absolutes in this thread. I had purposely unbuttoned and tucked the flaps of my 2 breast pockets into the pockets before going out a few weeks back because I wanted to try the look. Anyway, while talking to a female friend, she reached over and fixed them. I thought it was rather endearing. I often fixed my boyfriend's sleeves when we were first going out. I still do, but I did it back then too, and I kept apologizing, just like, "Sorry, that was bugging me. It was all flipped up."
And finally, after a handful of months, he said, no, he really likes it when I do that. I never understood why, but I guess it's probably for this reason. It's a welcoming feeling, I guess, someone fixing you up to make sure you look nice. People who mimic your body language don't want to displease you. That's as close to universally true as these things go. You cross your arms, they cross their arms, that sort of thing. Nervous people often lick their lips and swallow. Liars often do too, as well as touch their mouth, but it can be delayed after the lie when they feel like they've got away with it. Like if you respond with, "Oh, that makes sense," that's when they lick their lips. People falsely accused of lying generally have a stronger reaction than those caught in the lie. One-on-one, that sometimes comes out as the honest person confronts you face-on, while the liar turns a little away. It's more about the line of their hips and shoulders, not so much where they point their nose. I once read that if someone is accused of something they didn't do, they'll be more likely to use contractions in their speech. Something to do with being so comfortable with their own innocence that they speak informally. I didn't twist her arm. Truth. I did not twist her arm. Lie. Maybe bunk, but when applied to my children, I find it's fairly accurate. I did not have relations with that woman. If you're in a situation where you have to pretend to be surprised, keep your eyebrows raised for more than a second. That's a telltale sign. Genuinely surprised people will keep their face in that state for more than 1 second. I'm pretty sure you just made 10,000 people raise their eyebrows and pretend to be shocked at something, only to find that they looked ridiculous. I discovered this one on my own, although I probably wasn't the first. This works for girls and guys. When someone suddenly sees someone they find attractive, the first thing they usually do is fix their hair. They usually can't stop themselves. It's an instinctive thing, like, oh, someone's hot, gotta look fly. So the next time you're walking about and someone fixes their hair right when they see you, they're attracted to you. Can confirm. I always do this when looking at the mirror. Wandering eyes in a shop. Not the determined kind, the thinking kind. They're looking for presents. This observation has become so spot on that I ask our customers, so, who are you getting a gift for? And that always surprises them and breaks the ice. People looking to steal something have their eyes everywhere else besides what they're taking. Watching their body versus their eyes is a pretty good sign to customer service them into leaving. I remember saying to some kid that just pocketed some rare earth magnets at my store, "Hey man, those magnets are pretty cool, huh?" He then rounded the corner and stuck them into a metal pole and walked out. I felt more proud of myself for stopping the theft more than the $2 it saved the store. Working in a bookshop, this was usually so obvious you could laugh. You'd get guys walk in, open a random fiction novel in the middle of the book, and start skimming through it like a magazine. But their eyes were never on the pages, they'd never even look at what they were reading. This is a cool switch. According to Amy Cuddy, changing your posture can change your mindset, and your mindset can change your behavior. So, say, sit in a submissive way for just a couple of minutes, and inexplicably, you're not as likely to make assertive positions. Now, changing to a powerful stance, and a couple of minutes later with no prompting, you feel like you're in charge. Assertive and comfortable with making high-power decisions, even when they're a gamble. Glance at their feet. If they're pointed towards you, they're engaged in your conversation. If they're pointed away, often toward an exit, they'd like to end the conversation. I use this at work all the time, and I notice myself doing it. If the person isn't breathing, you should run away because you've killed them in your fit of rage. Works every time. If you see a guy walking down the street and he awkwardly lifts one leg up higher than the other repeatedly, he's trying to peel his sack off his inner thigh without alerting whomever he is with. We mostly do this when we're with women or family. If we're around other guys, no fricks given. I wish my roommate would learn that me walking away from him into my room means it's the end of the gosh darn conversation. Stop bringing new crap up or starting a new story. Mother fricker will keep telling me new crap despite me having disappeared into my room. I don't even act interested. The dude just can't not talk. Someone mentioned body language clues being generally true but not universal. I suffer fairly bad anxiety in public spaces. I've been told by my friends that I look angry as I walk down the street. I've received looks from security staff in shops, maybe in my head because of the anxiety, etc., as I walk around the store looking shifty and darting my eyes everywhere until I settle down. I think I look everything but nervous. I'm sure most people have a more general character, and you can assume body language for them, but a good 10% must have less typical personality traits that affect their body language. If someone hugs you and then pats you on the back simultaneously, they're uncomfortable with hugging you. If you're having a conversation with a girl and some guy just comes in and interrupts the conversation, don't stay. In fact, walk away. If the girl doesn't like that guy, she'll automatically come looking for you. People will always revert back to someone they trust or are interested in.
When you subscribe, make sure to hit the bell to turn on notifications. Put the playlist on in the background to finish listening to all the stories, linked at the top of the description. And if you like Am I the Genius, give Am I the Jerk a shot, linked in the description too. Either way, thanks a lot for watching, and we'll see you guys next time.